How do we do this again?
How do we do this again? I think I normally start because you did that one time when you were not pleased.
Yep.
Hello and welcome once again to fSobriety. I am Craig Woods.
And I'm James Hamilton. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, James, and Happy New Year to our listeners. Although the world being the state that it's in, perhaps we should just be a bit cautious and say Happy New Year, ?
I mean, here comes the new year, same as the old year.
Let's hope not. Let's try and be positive. We want to try and be positive in 2021.
Here we are once again, having started the podcast because we were in a lockdown for COVID. Beginning 2021, recording a podcast episode because we're back in lockdown.
Yeah, brand new lockdown. Same new lockdown, same shit. Lockdown 3, Tokyo Drift.
2 lockdown, 2 furious.
So how you think you're going to be spending this lockdown? Going to be different from the first 2?
Nope, I'm going to be doing precisely the same shit as before.
It's precisely the same nothing, precisely the same not attaining any of the goals I subconsciously set.
Exactly. Although, having said that, I have set myself a rule for this year. A rule? No, I'm not Dua Lipa. I have set myself...
Well, one day, God willing, you will be.
I have set myself resolutions for this year. I don't usually, but this year I have resolved to read a book a month, given...
I thought you were just going to say, read a book. And I was like, well, I was going to give you a full slow clap, because, okay, good for you.
A whole book. Yeah, as anyone who listened to our bumper Christmas episode, available on buzzsprout.com/.
Well, they're probably all still listening to it right now. They've been listening to it since Christmas Eve. It was only 4 weeks long.
But yeah, I didn't really read much last year, so I've already started with my first book of the year, which is one of your top 10 from last year, which was Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James.
Sweet.
I'm enjoying it already. It's got a map and a glossary, so that's how you know it's fantasy.
Yeah, it's got all the things you like. So we are back on track for see if we can go a whole year of podcasting. We did almost half a year in 2020. Let's see if we can go a full year, see how that turns out.
They said it couldn't be done, but we're on episode 10.
I think they said it shouldn't be done.
They were right, but they were also wrong. We're on episode 10.
Yeah, the big fat 10. So special occasion, and I think that special occasion calls for us to go back to that thing we said we were going to do right at the start of the podcast, which is continue with our Mr Robot rewatch, which if you're listening to this you probably know that already, thus you listening.
But before we get into all that, how have you been?
Oof. I mean, you know, I've been better, but I've also been worse, so like I say, trying to stay positive.
Have you borne witness to any new entertainments over the holiday period?
Actually, not really anything new, no, because I think as I said in our previous episode, I just did a massive binge of everything that I thought I needed to catch up on. So since 2021 began, there hasn't been much that's come my way in this first. I mean, we are at the time of recording only a week into this new year, so no.
Less than, in fact. It's currently, not to date our podcast, but it's currently the 6th of January.
Dating the podcast was precisely what I was trying to avoid.
We're dating the podcast by reading the exact date that we're recording it. Hey, it's my birthday tomorrow, so I get to,
that's true,
talk about the date.
Happy birthday in advance.
Happy birthday, James. Congratulations on one more year of the gradual decay of your puny organic physical form.
It's nice that she cares.
Yeah, I've been similarly off the entertainment grid, other than I watched 2 event movies, Craig.
Mm-hmm. Is that Event Horizon and then The Event starring Don McKellar?
Yes.
And Parker Posey. It's a good movie, by the way. Somebody should check that out. Somebody out there should check that out. It's decent. It also has, what's her name? Jane Leeves, who was Daphne in Frasier. And also Olympia Dukakis. It has an amazing cast, actually. It's a really lo-fi kind of indie movie from the early 2000s. It's not the cheeriest movie, but it's quite funny in places. And it's got Don McKellar just playing Don McKellar, kind of offbeat, quirky Canadian guy.
I have not seen that. I have seen Event Horizon, though. I liked it when I was a wee guy, so... Well, wee-ish
I was going
guy.
to say, I was like 20 when that movie came out.
Yeah.
You're not that much younger than me.
Anything before 30 for me is when I was a wee guy. So, but it, spoke to my love of both Orbital and Daft Horror.
Daft Horror are my favourite 90s electronic act.
Paul Anderson's finest directorial moment, probably.
In the days where Paul Thomas Anderson was still unknown enough that they could sometimes be confused for each other, and Paul W.S. Anderson absolutely loved that.
Yep. I remember wondering like why the guy who directed Boogie Nights also directed the Resident Evil franchise.
It's absolute travesty. What's going on?
But no, I watched Tenet.
Mm-hmm.
See, because it's our 10th episode, Craig, and Tenet has the word 10 in it, but also it's the same forwards as it is backwards, so you know it's clever.
Mm-hmm. 2 sentences in, I'm already exhausted thinking about this movie, which I've not seen for the listeners' benefit, and I will not see because I do not like Christopher Nolan, and everything I've heard about this movie just reminds me of all the reasons why I dislike Christopher Nolan. But anyway, continue.
Well, spoilers for Tenet ahead. I'll give people who want to... In fact, I'm also going to spoil the shit out of Wonder Woman 1984, so anyone who wants to watch those movies and doesn't want them spoiled by me for... Like, I'm not going to talk about them for long, but maybe the Hamiltron could tell them when to skip ahead to when we start talking about Mr. Robot.
What am I? The speaking clock over here. I get it. New year, same old shit. Fine. Sigh. Dear listener, if you don't want to hear talk about Wonder Woman, Tenet, and UK politics on a Mr. Robot review podcast, 1. That's perfectly understandable, and 2. Skip to, fuck it, I don't know, about 23 minutes or something. Whatever.
Right, okay, it's your fucking job, but fine then, if you're going to be that much of a arsehole about it. I'll just do the timestamps.
Don't upset the machines, James. Don't upset the machines. Not in this cursed timeline.
So Tenet, I actually enjoyed it, and so much as I enjoy dumb action movies sometimes, and that's what it is. It's a dumb action movie putting on a smart guy hat and a monocle and trying to be really smart. Do you know what it is?
From Christopher Nolan, you astound me.
Tenet is the most Christopher Nolan film that Christopher Nolan has ever Christopher Nolaned, but it's also basically just a James Bond film.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Mark Bernardin mentioned that, and I was like, shit, it is. He's right. I was trying to figure out in my head what it is. Mark Bernardin on Fat Man Beyond described it as a James Bond film, only like or dislike or love or hate James Bond. You know who James Bond is as a character from the second he's on screen. Mm-hmm. He's essentially a cipher. In so much as he's this super cool shoot it and shag it kind of guy, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
You know who James Bond is.
I'm familiar, yeah.
You don't know who. I don't mean you specifically. I mean you watch a James Bond film and you're like, oh yeah, that's who he is. He's a super cool spy guy, whatever. Yeah. You don't know who anyone is in Tenet. The lead actor is literally called the lead character, I should say, is literally called the protagonist.
See what he did there. That's the worst character name since Garth Ennis called one of his characters in The Boys the female.
Yep, and he refers to himself as the protagonist on several occasions.
Okay, I want all copies of this film destroyed now.
It's unclear. He's probably a secret agent, but it's not really clear. And his job is to
annoy
someone in the future. Someone from the future is sending bullets back in time that go reverse through time to kill people. Yeah, he ends up working for someone. It's unclear who. Mm-hmm. And he has to find Kenneth Branagh being amazing as like a Russian oligarch crime boss, by the way.
Is there any scenery left at the end of the movie?
Well, none that has been unchewed, put it that way. Kenneth Branagh is a Russian multi-billionaire crime boss who has somehow invented a machine that when you enter it and you come out of the other side, you're then traveling backwards in time, but
so
not in a different timeline. You're actively going in reverse through time while the rest of time is still going forwards. So basically, you're just doing stuff backwards while people around you are going forwards, or they're going backwards while you're going forwards. And it's basically, I think what Christopher Nolan did was think, how can I shoot some stuff that I think will look really clever and filmmakers will watch it and be like, how have you got people running forward past a building that's exploding backwards? But actually, what it just looks like is like some of it he's just reversed a shot. Mm-hmm. It's not even like David Lynch having people speak backwards and then reversing it clever, or having people act backwards then playing it forwards. A lot of the time it literally just looks like he's filmed something and then reversed the tape, I guess, and been like, there you go, here's the action, and it's not very impressive. I mean,
I already hate this movie.
I don't have the Christopher Nolan hate that you've got. Like, I really like a lot of his stuff, Like Inception.
Memento is Christopher Nolan's only good movie. Don't at me.
Hang on, we're just alienating all the Batman fans there.
People are allowed to like crap movies if they like. That's up to them. I'm not picking fights, but my God, Christopher Nolan is one of the big reasons why I just get so sick of modern blockbuster thriller movies. It's all of the pretend levels of being cerebral, when in actual fact there's nothing particularly cerebral about what he's doing, which is fine. It doesn't need to be, but stop pretending that it is. And everything's so fucking po-faced constantly.
Yep.
And his characters, as you say, are always ciphers, and they're always pretty much the same, which is fine. A lot of filmmakers' protagonists are the same, but they tend to be engaging characters, or at least entertaining. I remember very little about any of Christopher Nolan's protagonists. I don't remember who they were as people. I don't care
there
to
was
remember.
One of them was a billionaire who dresses up as a bat, fights crime. But no, disregarding that. So yeah, like for example, Inception, I thought it was worth seeing in the cinema because it looked pretty impressive when like the scenery folds in on itself and stuff.
That movie pissed me off so much, man. I really violently hated that movie.
I enjoyed it, and I thought visually it was fun to look at. This though, there's nothing in it that's particularly visually impressive. It uses practical effects, so congratulations for not using a lot of CGI, but at the same time it's like it doesn't look that impressive. So yeah, but you know what, I enjoyed it. It was like a James Bond film that occasionally I had to stop and go, wait, is this what's happening? Think about it and then play it again, and at the end I was like, yeah, that's what it was. Edward out of Twilight, Robert Pattinson. Couldn't remember his name. Robert Pattinson is really good in it.
I think he's a good actor, but Christopher Nolan has cast good actors before, and each time I'm just like, could have been anybody in that fucking role, to be honest.
The one thing about it that annoyed me more than anything else, and I found out that I'm not alone, just a quick look on Twitter or on the internet finds, the sound mix is abysmal.
He does have previous for this though, Nolan.
Yeah, like 90% of the dialogue in this movie is either whispered while there are explosions or said through a mask, and it's like I can't hear what's happening. And then like the explosion will be super loud and then the dialogue's super quiet. And yeah, I saw Lemmy going on about it actually, and I was like, yes, I feel it. I'm not alone. But yeah, I think if Nolan just hired someone good to do his sound, it'd be great, man. Again, if you're listening,
I was going to say you should get in there.
I can edit a 3-hour podcast in 2 weeks, Christopher.
So that's the Nolan report. What was this about Wonder Woman?
Wonder Woman 1984. Same length as Tenet.
What's that, 5 days?
Yeah, with somehow less content. Well, piece of shit movie. There's my review. Wonder Woman 84 is a piece of shit.
I've not seen it, and I've not even seen the first one. I've kind of avoided the DC movies generally, just because. But I did, weirdly enough, listen to the post-show recaps, the review of the latest Wonder Woman movie, and I don't really know why. I think it's just because I listen to a lot of their podcasts anyway, and Josh Wigler is a good podcaster. I just always enjoy listening to his takes on stuff. He really liked Wonder Woman 84, but as he was talking about it, I was like, I don't think I'm going to enjoy that movie. Bless you, Josh, but I don't think that's for me.
I really enjoyed the first Wonder Woman, with the exception of like the last act where it turns into your typical superhero CGI fight scene. Mm-hmm. Up till that point, I thought it was a really good movie. It's some great big like set pieces in it. Gal Gadot's personal politics aside, I thought she was pretty good as Wonder Woman. I kind of enjoy that they had to make everyone from Themyscira have an Israeli accent because Gal Gadot, bless her, can't act her way up a paper bag. She's got the Sean Connery problem, you know. Yes. Hello, I'm Wonder Woman from Themyscira. Last of the Amazons.
I think I saw you posting on Twitter about it.
They could have made a solid, tight 90-minute movie where Wonder Woman fights Cheetah, and there's a lot of 80s music.
If somebody described the movie that and say that's what it was, I'd be all over it. But that's not what it is, I guess.
No, instead we have Pedro Pascal playing some sort of like absurd Lex Luthor style character who's also...
Is he the Chilean actor who's the Mandalorian guy?
Yes, he is.
Right, okay.
He in this portraying some sort of weird Lex Luthor / like Donald Trump toss up, where he shouts a lot about his son. There's a magic wishing stone.
Of course there is.
Yeah, he becomes the magic wishing stone.
Right, yeah, I heard about this on the post-show recaps podcast. Yeah,
and through powers and science that are never explained and have no set rules, sort of becomes super powerful and ends up using satellites to be able to make everyone in the world make a wish that will empower him somehow.
Embiggen himself.
He embiggens the shit out of himself. During this, Wonder Woman wishes that her boyfriend comes back to life because she spent 80 years moping over a man, because obviously that's what that's what a strong superhero female really should do. He does come back, only instead of Chris Pine just reappearing, he's in the body of someone else. He sort of possesses a guy, and then they have sex. So she sort of rapes an unwilling, unknown guy to have sex with her boyfriend, and then they put this guy's body in grave danger in a couple of action set pieces, while Wonder Woman loses her powers sometimes, except when she doesn't, when she needs them. And then Kristen Wiig's pretty good as Cheetah, but sort of somehow ends up looking a bit like a cheetah. And then they have a CGI fight scene, and Kristen Wiig is just there as like a heavy for Pedro Pascal's pointless bad guy. And it's man, it's so bad.
She is a potentially great cheesy supervillain who would be great on screen. So it disappoints me that they've done that. But that's kind of what I expected, and why I've just generally stayed away from the DC movies. I was never as invested in DC growing up anyway, but I do like some of it, and obviously I'm familiar as anybody else who read comics as a kid with the world of Wonder Woman, and Cheetah was always a fun villain. That does not sound fun at all, what you've described. It sounds like they've gone all super fawns on this movie and left no shark unjumped.
There is little to no 80s music in it. There's a little bit of 80s fashion.
They said that on the podcast I listened to, and I was like, why? What is the point? How could you... What is the point of setting anything specifically in the 80s and it not at least having a few choice needle drops from the era? That makes zero sense.
Yeah, do you remember... Did you see the trailer for it? Where it had, the big sort of Hollywoodized version of Blue Monday as the music?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, cool, they're going to have Blue Monday and stuff. It's going to be... Yeah, nah, nothing. There's some 80s cars. She swings around a shopping mall. I don't know if they were trying to go for, Sometimes it seems like a superhero film that was made in 1984, more than one that's set in 1984. It had shades of, Donner-era Superman, but more like Superman: The Quest for Peace in terms of quality. So yeah, 2 thumbs down for me.
How many 5s out of 9?
Oh yeah, I should say Tenet gets 3.55 out of 9. Wonder Woman 1984 gets 1 5 out of 9. Only because on the rare occasions when Wonder Womans, and they are rare, I still think that Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman looks great. She looks like there's a superhero right there. But that's your 5 out of 9. Everything else about this movie is insufferable trash. And yeah, so they've immediately... It got watched enough on HBO Max, though, that they've immediately greenlighted the third film in the quote-unquote Wonder Woman
trilogy.
That's
something to look forward to.
I'm going to be sure and give that a body swerve.
After everything you've said, part of me is hoping that we don't make it through 2021 just so we don't have to put up with the next Wonder Woman movie.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing is, though, right, as well as being some subpar action scenes, there's a lot of Wonder Woman being rescued by a guy. And it's the same problem I had with the Tomb Raider reboot movie, where Lara Croft was rescued by men a lot, and I'm like, it's not what I want to see in my woman-led action movie.
Is Wonder Woman bound quite a bit as well?
Only by her inability to do anything other than be sad about her man.
Well, fair enough. That draws a line under that. I've been mainly entertaining myself just with the absolute shit show of real life. I worked quite a bit over the Christmas and New Year period, and so I've been doing the subtitles for people's BBC News and whatnot, and I just cannot escape the grim reality. I'm enjoying at the moment that suddenly everybody in the country, the UK, are all absolutely 100% behind the idea of broadband communism and free school meals and an NHS that's properly funded. And I'm thinking to myself, man, if only somebody who had stood for election had literally offered all of those things at the last election. Anyway...
I don't know, man. What about his terrorism?
Are you saying somebody stood on that platform? That would be weird.
All it takes for people to want that sort of stuff, as it turns out, is a massive economic crisis and a global pandemic.
That's up to demand, which hopefully it's also up to demand for podcasts. I think, it's a lot of these moderates who are now tying themselves in knots about this thing about broadband access and food inequality. After all the sneering they did at Corbyn proposing these things in the first place, as I can't help but feel that most of them, they just want to appear as being in favour of these things when they know fine well there's absolutely zero chance of it happening.
Yeah.
Hopefully there is a chance, but at the moment the chances look dismal. And I think that's the reason why a lot of these people are suddenly vociferous in their support for a thing they know won't happen, or they feel confident won't happen. And frankly, fuck these people.
Yeah, the chances of the internet communism happening is not... I don't think that's going to happen. But the free school meals thing, though, like... Is it Marcus Rashford? Mm-hmm. The footballer who did the campaign? He seems to have enough clout, as they believe they call it on the internet, where to jab people with hot pokers till they do it, because as we all know, the current UK government's a bit flippy-floppy. They'll say one thing and then 2 days later they'll completely go back on it.
They'll wait for Nicola Sturgeon to do something first, which they'll pillory her for, but then the next day they'll do the same thing.
Exactly. But yeah, because I remember they were like, no, we're not continuing this programme. Marcus Rashford was like, you fucking are. And then they were like, yeah, we are. Yeah. But it was our choice.
Yeah, cancel this show, no further seasons. I don't want to watch this anymore.
There was a good bit in that whole saga where believe it was the Daily Mail did a big expose of like, do you know how much Marcus Rashford earns? Do you know how much his house is worth? And he's saying that you should pay for free school meals with your quote-unquote taxes. And it's like, yeah, guy pays taxes.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is not an episode of F Democracy. That's an entirely different podcast. So shall we move on and dive back into this colossal rewatch of Mr. Robot?
Indeed, we're almost halfway through.
We're almost halfway through. Yes,
the first half of season 1.
We're going to do. So we're going to cover 2 episodes in this podcast. So episodes 3 and 4 of season 1, and see, by the time we've done that, we're practically finished.
Yeah. Quick reminder here: this is a spoiler review.
Yeah.
So we will be going deep not only into episodes 3 and 4 of season 1, but we'll probably, in fact, given episode 4, we will likely be talking again what's more about the entire series.
Everything we talk about will be in the context of having seen the entire show. So it is a 100% spoiler-packed podcast. So if you have not watched Mr. Robot to the very end, or you haven't and you just don't really care about spoilers, actually, even if that's the case, stop that and don't do that.
Stop it, you dicks.
Don't be an idiot. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. Do not ruin for yourself what is one of the greatest pieces of narrative fiction in any medium in the last 20 years.
But now we've got that out of the way.
We going in? We doing this?
I got a drink.
I've got a drink also.
Then let's sip our appletinis and let's talk Mr. Robot. We're getting better at this.
Every time.
Yeah, we're getting better at our a cappella copyright royalty-free version of...
I think we found a calling. The flying pickets are shitting themselves. That's another modern contemporary reference for the kids there.
Episode 3, debug.mkv.
It was directed by Jim McKay. It was written by Sam Esmail. Fun note about Jim McKay, he holds the privilege in Mr. Robot of being the only director other than Sam Esmail to direct more than one episode.
Oh.
He directed 2.
I noticed also that he is kind of like the Canadian male Jennifer Lynch.
Yeah.
While researching his he's directed episodes of just about every American TV show from the last 2 decades.
And a really quite a cosmopolitan breadth of styles and genres. And like Jennifer Lynch, he also early in his career directed a few kind of indie movies in the late 90s, early 2000s.
He does a pretty decent job here.
I think he definitely does, yeah. He definitely is tuned into Esmail's vision to make this episode work. So the episode begins. We get the classic American Psycho-esque Terrell Wellick. He is in the front of his dressing mirror and he's making his pitch in his head to Philip Price, the CEO of Ecor, about why Terrell Wellick, should be the new CTO since Terry Colby is now kaput. And it's peak Patrick Bateman as he's doing this.
I've put down American Taiko.
Nice. And it's intercut with footage of him also jogging out in the street and doing his press-ups. I feel like this is very clear, as much of a solid nod as possible by Sam Esmail, knowing full well probably that people were going to compare this character to Patrick Bateman anyway. He just thought, fuck it, I'm just going to throw in what are clear kind of visual analogies to that character. It's a good decision in a way, because I think it sort of disarms us for where Tyrell eventually goes. He actually becomes extremely un-Patrick Bateman-like as this goes on. It's a great performance by Martin Wallstrom. It's not just the words he's saying, it's also the expression and the way he's really staring deep into his own eyes, and he's given that advertising executive grin. And every time he thinks he gets something wrong, it's the violence of the slap to his own face is actually really disturbing every single time. He's calling himself a piece of shit and says, my favourite line, don't be a cold robot. The production design is quite informed as well, because that mirror that he's looking into has got several panels, so we see like a kind of fractured version of him, which is quite in keeping with the show's themes of fractured personalities.
He jogs with no shirt on. He goes tap-saff when he's jogging.
Yeah, it's pure tap-saff.
And I was like, you know what, to be fair, if I looked like Martin Wallstrom, you'd have to pay me to wear a shirt. So, fair play to him.
I'm going to be talking more about shirtless men in this episode, so put a pin in that.
Put a shirt on that.
So he repeats to himself, you'll be the next CTO of this company. You will be the next CTO of this company. And he's repeating that to himself like a mantra, and it's actually quite reminiscent of the way that Elliot has those mantras that he repeats to himself. And it's one of the first ways that we see these two characters being kind of shown in parallel. And certainly the first couple of seasons, the first season definitely plays around with that a lot, that these two are on some way on the same kind of wavelength, which inevitably led to a lot of people after the reveal about Elliot's mental state that perhaps Tyrell was an alternate personality. We'll maybe speak about that more in a bit, because I've got another note about that later. So this scene in Philip Price's office, the receptionist is offering him stuff and Tyrell's just completely digging him, lost in his own neuroses. First appearance of Philip Price.
Yep, Philip Price, who... And this is the first piece of vaguely Mr. Robot-related trivia that I'm going to drop.
Go for it.
Philip Price, obviously played by Michael Christopher.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of these actors who every time I see him, I think I've seen him in something and I can never think what it is. But I did not know that Michael Christopher won the Pulitzer Prize in 1977 for his Broadway play The Shadow Box.
I remember reading about this, yeah.
Which was subsequently made into a film in 1980 starring Joanna Woodward and Christopher Plummer.
Mm-hmm.
So I've not seen it, but I'm going to check it out. I didn't know that he was a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright. Try saying that 3 times fast.
Philip Price, Pulitzer Prize winning playwright. Yeah, I remember reading about that back when the show was airing, and I was that way when I was so obsessed with the show, I was just looking up everybody involved in it. It's no surprise, really, that he comes from the theatre when you see his performance as Philip Price.
His ability to monologue is...
Yeah, and he's got one of those voices that just resounds. No need for amplification. It's funny, here, we don't get very much of him here, and this is the last we see of him, I think, for a few episodes.
Yeah.
It's a very, very subtle introduction for what is eventually a very non-subtle character.
Yeah, I love that introduction of him being like... You just assume that he's going to be this faceless... top of the ladder guy you're not going to see, and like you say, he comes back, he's one of the core characters by the end of the show. He's one of the linchpins that the whole thing spins on, but he seems like that sort of, he has this great amiable but dismissive way about him that's very, very high executive. He's so good at carrying that off.
Yeah, and one of the things we get to know about Philip Price is that when he is pleasant, it's usually in a way just to usher people along, and it's usually because he does not have the energy to do anything else. He's the kind of person who could destroy someone with the snap of his finger, but he doesn't have the energy to do it, and sometimes it's just easier to be pleasant to people and dismiss them quietly, which is exactly what he does to Tyrell in this scene. Tyrell tries to protest and explain why he's there, and Philip Price says the words, "I get it," completely not getting it. And he says, the board is very excited about the potential CTO they've chosen, and he has the receptionist make another appointment, and Tyrell is just standing there, no, but... And I love that Price turns around, has time to admire Tyrell's Brioni tie, says, "Great taste, as always," turns away and does the backwards wave, goes, "Be well." It's classic Philip Price. And the weird thing is, I remember the first time I watched this, I don't think I even thought for a moment that that character would even come back in any significant way.
Yeah.
It's funny, you look now and you see there's so much of the nuance of that character present in just that really short scene.
The seeds are definitely being planted in these 2 episodes for how everything's going to go from this point onwards.
Yeah, totally. So Philip Price's receptionist goes to set Tyrell up to be CC'd in, and Tyrell insists that he just be emailed directly. He says this is too important to miss, and of course this is Tyrell planning that he's just going to find out his own way who the potential CTO is and deal with them in his own way.
And we see Sharon Knowles as well just in the background.
Yep.
Press F. And this is the 3rd time I've watched this episode, and I hadn't noticed her in there the first 2 times, but I was really, paying attention this time.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of details like this in this show. That the seeds were they were germinating well from the start, and it is really interesting to go. One of the things that's great about going back and doing this podcast is that I think, like you just said, we do become a bit more concerned about scrutinising things, and you're like, oh shit, they actually put that in right this early in the series. I love the way Tyrell just looks like a broken marionette in the back of the car as Sutherland is driving him back. So they go to meet this homeless guy under the underpass, and this is clearly something that's a bit of a regular occurrence, where Tyrell just turns up and beats the shit out of this guy and pays the guy for the pleasure, basically. His pleasure, not the guy's pleasure. I love this wee exchange here. The guy says 300 this time, and Tyrell says, spoken like a true capitalist. And off comes the jacket, off comes the Brioni tie that Philip Price liked so much, and it's Tyrell entering his animal mode. It's that whole J.G. Ballard thing, that underneath all the symbols of pristine civilization, there is just this bubbling underneath, there's this animalistic rage that is just so close to the surface to just bridling over kind of thing. I like that the guy asks him, bad day at the office. And Tyrell just starts going to town on this guy, and Sutherland is just looking around, seeing if anybody is watching. Does not seem particularly perturbed about this behaviour on Tyrell's part, which just makes you think, Sutherland, you are a weird guy. Or he's seen it before a lot of times. Oh, for sure he's seen it before, but it's the fact he continues to facilitate this without any even sign of misgiving. It's like, okay then. The sound design when he's punching the guy is amazing, because it sounds like a fight. It doesn't sound like a Hollywood. Yeah, just very dull thuds. Yeah. The homeless guy ends up pleading, and Tyrell goes in for the final kick, knocks the guy out cold. That weird way that Tyrell just sort of nudges him with his foot. It's like, it's clear he's out cold. Like, what is he hoping that he's dead? Like, what's going on there? Right away, Tyrell gathers himself, gets back in the car, and we get the epic title card just as the car drives off from under the underpass. And the homeless guy just lying broken in the bottom left. The way that's framed, the title card frame, with the car driving off, there's so much going on there just in terms of... It actually reminds me in a way of kind of classic Scorsese, that scene, back when I thought Scorsese was good. But just having the pristine car drive off from this grimy underpass and the guy's body lying right at the very extreme of the bottom left-hand side. It's a very Esmail shot, even though Esmail didn't direct this. We've spoke about this before, though. I wonder how much Esmail is hanging over everyone who's involved in like the writing and directing of any episode. I think I mentioned before, it is widely reported that he was on set all the time in season 1. So even when he wasn't I think he directed 3 episodes in this first season, but he was on set, present the entire time, regardless of who was directing. So yeah, he was probably being a backseat director. Alright, so we segue to the hospital. We see this fly buzzing around the ventilator. Do you know what? Shout out to the Hollywood fly wranglers, because that is a well-trained fly. Mm-hmm. It's bang on its cues. Yep. Jeff Goldblum knocking it out of the park. Elliot's talking to us about debugging. It says it's all about understanding the bug and why it was there in the first place, which sort of reflects his advice from Krista in the previous episode. So we're getting a definite continuance there from the previous episode. We had mentioned before just how much, now that we're watching these one at a time or 2 at a time, it's easier to focus in on just how individual each of these episodes are, and you do become way more clued in to just the way in which each episode sets up its main theme and its main motifs. And this fly, the ventilator, the talk of debugging, that sets the tone for this entire episode, and the next episode does it as well. and I'll talk about that when we get there. But yeah, I think because the first couple of times I watched this show, I just binge watched it. So you do not appreciate these things that same way. So we continue to talk about debugging, and Bugs generally says it's no accident, it came to you with a purpose, an unconscious bubble popping to the surface with a revelation you've secretly known all along. Now, of course, in the context of the whole series, that kind of sums up Elliot's own mental state, given that he, in essence, as the mastermind, is that unconscious bubble popping to the surface. And, you know, there is a whole set of other revelations that await Elliot at this point. I mean, at this point in time, he doesn't even know that he and Mr. Robot are the same person. It's crazy how just in these subtle bits of dialogue or monologue, Sam Esmail was planting these things all along, that you could go back and say, oh, fuck's sake, yeah, it was just staring us in the face the whole time.
There's a bit really shortly in this episode that I watched and listened to about 8 times in a row, because I think there was something in it, and then I watched it with subtitles on to see if it was saying what I was thinking it was saying, and it was inconclusive, but I'll see what you think when we get there. But yeah, it gave me that whole, man, Esmail was telling us all this from the beginning vibes.
So Elliot says, the bug gums up the works until it forces me to make a call, kill me or embrace me. Or maybe I'm just freaking out because I never thought I'd wake up to find these two women staring back at me. And these two women are Krista and Shayla. And he's got the fly on his finger as he says that, which I thought was just a beautiful visual touch. He has no memory of having called Shayla. So is it possible, do you think, that Mr. Robot made the call?
I think Mr. Robot made the call, or someone made the call.
I considered it might be the real Elliot or the unified Elliot, whatever you want to call him, but I think Mr. Robot is more likely, because I can't imagine the real unified Elliot coming out at this point, seeing him finding himself injured and then not completely coming to, if he was going to make it that far out. I don't know, but it's inconclusive anyway, because Sam Esmail is never going to tell us. But I feel like there's something that makes sense about Mr. Robot being the one to have quote unquote pushed Elliot and injured him in the first place, and then also immediately made the call. Sheila is told she was his emergency contact, and Elliot seems to have no memory of any of that. He's told he can't leave the hospital until he speaks to a psychiatrist, so that's why Krista's been called in. He likewise doesn't remember requesting Krista. He claims he was jumped by kids, says it's not the end of the world. Krista tells him the doctors wanted to do a full drug panel, but he refused. He admits to Krista that he's been using morphine, and she suggests rehab, but Elliot insists, of course, I'm not a junkie, cool story, bro. And Krista suggests a bi-monthly drugs test. And this is where we get this great bit of background about William Highsmith, head of IT at the hospital. In fact, he is the IT department, Elliot tells us. He's also an idiot, but the people who hire him are also idiots. He's on a slim budget, has protected the entire network from people like Elliot, so he never stood a chance. Uses dated software and all this. It runs on Windows 98, and it's one of the reasons why Elliot made the hospital his emergency facility, because he can now edit his own records.
This rings very true for, did you remember not that long ago there was a bunch of stuff about the NHS and how NHS computers run on Windows 98?
Yes, and there was that, what was that virus, that worm that kind of took out so much of the NHS network a couple of years back, 2 or 3 years back?
Yeah, and people were like, wait, why the fuck is the NHS running on like such mad outdated software? And it's obviously,
it's crazy.
It's a thing, you know?
Yeah, and I think at the time when I first saw this, I was thinking to myself, well, that's a real damning commentary on the US healthcare system. But in actual fact, it seems it doesn't matter what country you go to.
Yeah.
So we know now that Elliot's been editing his own records so that they can say whatever he likes. And so he tells Krista with complete confidence he won't do morphine again. Cut to, or as I've written here, snort to. Taking an almighty snort in the convenience store with Shayla. He's having an energy drink breakfast. The credit card machine's down due to the hack. And Elliot tells us it's all about finding the bug. Mr. Robot found Ecor's bug in him. Sheila asks Elliot if he's responsible for Vera getting busted, and Vera is now on murder charges. Sheila no longer has a source of income. Elliot denies being involved. Sheila seems to buy it, or at least she wants to. They get to Elliot's apartment and it's been broken into, and of course Darlene waits inside with the busted lock and handle. Elliot says, I changed the locks, and I love Darlene's deadpan. You should probably got something better if you wanted it to, work. And she's flicking through a glossy magazine, says, look, Jessica Alba wants to join fSobriety.
And it is some woodsy level photoshopping of Jessica Alba holding the fSobriety mask.
She says, I'm not the princess of social graces, but I believe typically it goes something like this. Hi, this is Darlene. And of course, Elliot jumps in to stop her saying the inevitable, I'm Elliot's sister.
Well, see, this is the thing I was talking about earlier. Because to me it sounds like she says, I believe it goes something like, hi, this is Darlene, and she says my, and he says stop.
Yep.
But it didn't say it in the subtitles, and I listened to it a lot. And she says something like under before as he says stop.
Oh,
and
really?
My headcanon is that she's about to say my sister,
Yeah.
and he stops her saying it.
Yeah, definitely that's what happens either way. That subconscious part of Elliot is leaping in there going, no, can't deal with this right now. And says, you need to leave. So yeah, it's the subconscious defense. It seems like on some level, well, we know it's the truth because we see the mastermind, quote unquote, remember that Darlene is his sister when she confronts him about it. So it's in the mastermind's subconscious. So for whatever reason, the mastermind is just choosing not to have this attachment. This is the first time this sort of recurs throughout the show, because towards the end of the final season, when we are in the loop where the real unified Elliot, as I call him, is sort of imprisoned, he has no Darlene in that world. And it seems like almost all the versions of Elliot, one of the main things they do to make sure they seal themselves off from the truth of the outside world is they get rid of Darlene, because she is his strongest link to that world.
She's like the one person that can bring him out of it all. And it's so sad when you find out that she knew all along.
It is really tragic. I was thinking about that a lot in these couple of episodes. I'm feeling for Darlene a lot now. Not that I wasn't before, but on this particular rewatch as we're going through this, the more I'm trying to see things from her perspective, I'm like, man, this is actually crushing, because she kind of knows what's going on here, and she just feels there's nothing she can really do about it.
Yeah, like I loved Darlene from the first time I watched it, but it's clear that she is the emotional heart of the story. Like, absolutely. And at first, she just seems like the funny weird sidekick.
Yeah, and a lot of her kind of quirkiness is explained away by the fact that she is Elliot's sister, because I think I mentioned this before, when you've got a sibling that you get on with, you do just kind of banter nonsense with each other. But because we are seeing this from the perspective of an Elliot who thinks he's just met Darlene and has no idea who she is, she seems like a crazy person because of the things she says, which makes it all the funnier when she exits the scene. She just looks over her shoulder and she says, I suggest you get a grip.
That's such a good line. It's so well delivered.
The way this whole scene is shot, by the way, I made lots of references in the previous episode to Eraserhead whenever we're in Elliot's apartment. The way this scene is shot, though, gave me pure Blue Velvet vibes, because that wide master shot when Elliot and Shayla are standing in the centre of the room, it's like whatever crazy wide lens David Lynch used on Blue Velvet to encompass the entirety of Dorothy's apartment. It reminded me a lot of that. That is going to be, I think that's my second Lynchian reference of this episode. If you want to take a drink every time I make one of those, because spoiler, there's going to be a few more of those.
I'm going to do that right now.
So Elliot says he has to go to work. He's looking down at the Jessica Alba mask photo. He says an error of thinking, it makes you who you are, which I don't think we need to say too much about that. We segue from that to Angela's error of thinking. She's jogging through the street. A guy drops a wallet. She quickly runs after him and returns it, only for a woman to run up and say, he stole my purse.
I love that.
Classic
her
Angela.
Her face is amazing.
I kind of love this. The show doesn't hammer this too much. We just get this idea of Angela that, and we see it in other ways in other aspects of her life, but we get this idea of Angela that she is constantly trying to do good stuff, but something is always thwarting her, and it kind of leads her on a path to be less good and therefore more effective. And it's sort of not helped by prime dickhead Ollie, who, when Angela returns to the apartment, Ollie is on the phone to Stella, aka Arizona Fred. He's telling Stella about the hack on Hackmail? Let's call it Hackmail. And Cisco wants Ollie to take the CD and use it to infect Allsafe's network. Stella asks why. He says he doesn't know. He gets irate. she's more concerned about the naked pics of her. He says, is that the only thing you're taking away from this conversation? And enter Angela and Ollie with some of the worst acting. And I don't mean Ben Rappaport's acting, I mean Ollie's acting. Hey babe, how was your run?
Ben Rappaport's acting as someone acting badly is
superb,
absolute chef's kiss.
Absolutely sublime. He's over egging the pudding with every single sentence. And Angela tells him about her returning the wallet to the robber. And he's like, nothing strange about that. That's just how good a person you are. Almost to a fault. And it's a nice choice of words because it hints back at what Elliot was telling us about the bug. And also hints to us that Angela's independence has to eventually take the form for being a more corrupted person in a way. So Angela, not having been born fucking yesterday, senses that something's up. And he goes on, this is the funniest thing about it, is he keeps going. He's like, I just mean that, you're too good for the world. That's why I love you. It's like, Jesus fucking Christ, stop talking, man. And she's just like, I'm going to hop in the shower.
What the fuck is Ollie's desktop image?
I don't think I noticed what was his
Did you know,
desktop image.
It's some sexy manga-esque comic book art of a reclining lady in a bikini.
Oh, yeah, of course it is.
It's amazing.
Why did I even ask? Ollie gets a phone call from Cisco with the old voice distortion. Tells him everything that the Dark Army own will be released, and he's on a time limit. And Cisco sends a message to the Dark Army that he'll break soon. Okay, this is the next few scenes. This is where this episode sort of segues into Mr. Robot, the sitcom, a wee bit.
Yeah.
The workplace sitcom.
Also, dare I say, Mr. Robot, the how could you possibly think he was actually there show.
Yes, yeah, we'll come to that in a second. Yeah, no, totally. There's a lot of that going on. Yeah, it's one of many occasions where now on this rewatch I feel like a complete imbecile. But Gideon calls a staff meeting, but it's very workplace sitcom in that the staff meeting only seems to consist of the people that we know well. So it's Elliot, Angela, Ollie, and Lloyd. And even Lloyd we don't know that well, but he's like the comedy background character. Elliot tells us he has some interesting stuff to say in this scene to us. He says, this is the world we live in, people relying on other people's mistakes, a warm, messy circle of humanity. Gideon is inviting them to dinner. He says, I cook a mean steak. Elliot says he has plans, which you could just put under. You just put canned laughter underneath it. And the way Angela and Ollie look at him, like what? So Gideon asks for the room. He says to Elliot, "Okay, you turn up looking like this, all beat up, and you expect me not to ask questions. I don't know how much you want me asking about your personal life." Elliot's delivery of "not at all" actually is just so deadpan and so great. I'm not being rude, just being honest. Elliot tells us, Mr. Robot may have found E-Core's bug, but he didn't find mine. That's the only way to protect myself. Never show them my source code. Close myself off. Create my cold, perfect maze where no one can ever find me, etc. Widen to reveal who is sitting at Elliot's desk with his peak Bugs Bunny energy. What's up, Elliot? Mr. Robot is just swinging around in Elliot's chair.
And it makes perfect sense the first time you see that he's just wandered in to this secure building.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the show's already done enough work at this point that you think there's no reason why Mr. Robot, the real human character, would not be capable of getting in if he wanted to. So it does. You're right. You don't ask questions. You just assume that it's above board. Says, I can't believe you work here. This place is a shithole. Thought I'd swing by and take you to lunch. It's that young woman who passes and goes, oh, that's nice. I think she likes you, bud. Elliot's like, you need to get out here. He's like physically trying to move him out of the chair. He's like, all right, well, let the record show I was trying to be a good wingman. And eventually says, I'm not that into redheads anyway. And this line that busted my gut is, the entire nation of Ireland makes my dick soft.
Yeah, I was I might have had tears at that part. It was so good.
This show is so packed with dialogue like that you sometimes just forget lines like that. Like, I'd completely forgotten that line until I was watching this episode. I was like, that is crazy how they just jam those lines in there. Mr. Robot says, I can either stay here and make a scene, or we can go for a drink in the bar next door. Either way, I'm going to have fun. Sitcom continues as we go into the wee pokey bar. This bar is just a great juxtaposition of elements here. It is the pokiest, narrowest wee bar, and there's just something automatically funny about the way the shot is composed. Where the bar is like in the middle, and you've got Elliot and Mr. Robot just cramped against the wall, and the way I think it's another special lens job, because the way Mr. Robot sort of looks comically smaller than Elliot, the way he's sitting behind him.
Yeah.
And it just sort of amplifies for me that Bugs Bunny energy. It was like, you should take it as a compliment. Nah, Doc. To the barman, these things are delicious. And he's sipping away on his appletini.
Which, again, this is another one of those, like, in retrospect moments. Of course he's not real, because the barman hasn't asked him what he wants as a drink yet.
Exactly.
And he's sitting with an appletini, and then the barman comes over and asks Elliot, what can I get you? Like,
the show
as if
takes
Mr. Robot had one waiting for him.
The show takes it for granted that we've assumed that Mr. Robot has just already ordered. And we just are too foolish and naive to question why they wouldn't both order at the same time. So, but anyway, Elliot orders $12 for an appletini, and Elliot surly just downs the whole thing. Mr. Robot says, I don't think you enjoyed that. I suggest sipping. So Mr. Robot apologises for the boardwalk fail. Elliot doesn't buy it. Says, I never wanted to hurt you. I get violent because I can't communicate. I think that's quite an instructive line here about Mr. Robot, because he's probably been sincere. I think the relationship is complicated because he knows that as much as he's manipulating the mastermind is still a part of Elliot, a necessary part, and Mr. Robot doesn't want to cause him any stress, but he has to do this. This is just what he's came up with as the only plan that he can think of that will get the mastermind to fulfill its purpose.
Oh yeah, he realizes he physically endangered and like physically hurt and hospitalized
right, yes.
Elliot's body, and I think that's a turning point.
So they're both in danger.
Yeah.
Mr. Robot can only communicate this through violence because that's sort of Mr. Robot's job in a way. It's like, as he says in season 4 to Fernando Vera, I am the gun. And therefore there's probably elements of Mr. Robot's plan where his skills need some finessing, because there's definitely things he's doing with the mastermind here that he could be better at. He's not always great at communicating what he means to the mastermind in a way that the mastermind is not going to get pissed off at. He says, I'm sure your dad felt shitty about what he did, and he would want to apologise to you too. Sometimes pushing your kid away is just easier. Don't stay mad at him too long, kiddo. What I think's interesting about that now, over and above just the metaphorical thing that I just mentioned about Mr. Robot's relationship to the mastermind, also Elliot finding out the truth about his father was never part of Mr. Robot's plan, because part of Mr. Robot's role as protector is to protect him from that knowledge and from those memories. So he's in fact banking on the mastermind being fond of Elliot's father and wanting to take revenge against Ecor for his father's death. He kind of assumes that will be the thing to drive the mastermind to fulfill its mission. The mastermind remembering the truth could never be part of the plan, and I guess that's why in season 4 we see Mr. Robot kind of hopelessly pleading with Kristen not to reveal it.
Yeah, because if Elliot if the mastermind discovers what a piece of shit his father was, that endangers his entire mission to free him.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest, I was wondering about that when he says, hopefully you'll forgive your dad at some point, don't hate him for too long. I was trying to place what that meant, but that makes sense the way you're saying it there. Yes.
Yeah. It seems to strike the right chord with Elliot, because when Mr. Robot gets up, leaves, he's like, you're leaving? And Mr. Robot says, that's what you want, isn't it? Elliot's very deeply unsure, but he just asks, well, what about the plan? And Mr. Robot says, well, you're the key to the whole thing. Without you, there is no plan. Which is maybe the most truthful thing that Mr. Robot says in this entire conversation. Now, we've spoken quite a bit in our previous episodes talking about this show, that there is another version of this show somewhere where it is a vigilante hack of the week drama. And the show in its early episodes is still occasionally given the illusion that it could still be that. And I think if on that show, or that version of the show, this would up the ante on the idea of the superhero main character being innately special and chosen in the way that so many of our protagonists are, in the way that Neo in The Matrix was, for example. It's kind of up and ramping up that aspect that we're supposed to think, because that's such a trope. I think we subconsciously just buy into this idea that, well, I guess there must just be something special about Elliot, and so all of the actual reasons behind Mr. Robot doing what he's doing with this other element of his own personality. We were so far off the track because the show generally does such a great job of playing around with well-worn tropes that we assume way more than we ought to assume. It also feeds a lot into the mastermind's own beliefs about itself, so even just on the level of what the show actually becomes, it's still perfect, because all the things the show is doing to hint towards the more generic direction are also the same things that Mr. Robot is using to start and provoke the core concerns of the mastermind, make the mastermind see itself as the hero, as the avenger. So Elliot's still a wee bit sceptical. He says, "You expect me to believe it's over?" And Mr. Robot says, "See you in another life, kiddo." And yeah, we could speculate just as much on that line as well. Okay, so then we segue into the next sitcom scene, which is pretty spectacular. Honestly, this is one of the funniest moments in the whole show. We see Elliot being very happy-go-lucky. He's telling us, "Did you hear that? It's really happening. F-Society is finally over." I love the use of the word "finally" when we're only 4 episodes into a 45-episode TV show. But Elliot's practically dancing along the pavement, and he's sipping on a Starbucks vanilla latte. And it's like, did you just have a personality transplant, bro? Which I realise is an ironic question to someone like Elliot.
Yep, he's listening to Steal My Sunshine.
Steal My Sunshine. Steel Mountain Sunshine, as it opens the next episode. So he says to us, he's talking about this glitch in the perfect reality I created over the years. I'll never slip up like that again. I'm going to be more normal now. Maybe Shayla can be my actual girlfriend. We'll go see those stupid Marvel movies. I'll heart things on Instagram. I'll join a gym. Now, side note here, this mention of a gym, I have to haul this up here. Mentioning the shirtless Terrell earlier, anytime Rami Malek has his shirt off in this show, like say the following episode from this,
yep,
it's the one thing in this show that takes me out of it a wee bit, because
the fact
Rami
that
Malek clearly has the physique of someone who attends a gym regularly. And I do not see how in Elliot Alderson's life he possibly has time to work out like this. Dude is ripped. He's also got one of those physiques that, for the most part, it's kind of masked, because when you just see him fully clothed, he just looks like a skinny guy. But when you see him with his shirt off, it's like, no, man, that dude is toned as fuck. What the fuck? So, yeah, when I hear that line, I'll join a gym. It's like, oh, another one? How many gym memberships have you got? One for each personality?
Maybe Elliot was a gym member and the mastermind isn't, you know?
I don't know that by that, though.
Because like, Elliot does his hair and stuff, you know, so as we see in season 4.
Yeah,
in
but
his perfect vision of himself.
But the social awkwardness is not unique to the mastermind. We know that is Elliot's life. I mean, that's confirmed to us throughout the show. So I find it a difficult hole to square. That's all I'm saying.
Craig, when he hearts a picture of a dog on Instagram, the Instagram account is Emmy Rossum's Instagram account.
Oh, really?
And it is her dog Cinnamon
is
that
that
he's hearting a picture
wow,
of.
That's
yeah,
incredible.
I don't know if Sam Esmail and Amy Rossum were married at the time or just going out with each other, but yeah, it's Amy Rossum's Instagram.
That's
that he's
fantastic.
hearting.
I did not notice that. That's brilliant. So this chat about the glitch, obviously Mr. Robot is a glitch, and Elliot says as much here, but that's more literal than he or we know at this point. The literal mention of a perfectly constructed reality here, it's like, man, Esmail really did all the work and we were just slow as fuck. So he says, I'm going to live a bug-free life from now on, anything to protect my perfect maze. It's the way he strolls into Gideon's office, swigging the latte. Hey, is that dinner still on? And it is like a completely different character, and the performance by Rami Malek is just beautiful stuff. It's shifting in completely different mannerisms, and you can see Gideon is like, what? Yeah, what? Why, you want to come? It's like, yeah, why not? Can I bring my girlfriend? Gideon's like, you have a girlfriend? Haven't asked her yet, but hopefully she'll say yes. And my favourite mannerism is when he points with the cup on his way out, as if to say, you. It's like, what?
Gideon's facial reaction is just amazing.
He says to his secretary, was he drinking Starbucks? Okay, meanwhile, Ollie, our other sitcom character, is deliberating over Cisco's virus disk in the all-safe office. He almost puts it in one of the disk drives at his terminal when Angela appears, and he goes back to the worst facade of innocence, part 2. Angela says, you still try to rip that CD? And he's just like, no, I'm up to innocence. You know me, innocent Ollie, all innocent all the time. I'm just innocencing my way through this office.
Oh, this CD, it's scratched or something.
We see Tyrell stalking Philip Price's receptionist on social media, and this is going to be his big plan to seduce him. What a great plan. So, I think this is the first time we've seen the big, what I call Tyrell and Joanna's TARDIS wardrobe, because that thing is fucking huge, man. And I love the way it's shot, and the fact that the colours are so kind of muted and earthy, and there's that metallic sheen on everything. This is supreme production design for two characters that are part lizard, part robot. Everything about this production design is so on point. And this is our first actual Joanna in the flesh appearance. And it's a lot of flesh because she's heavily pregnant. What I love about the way Joanna is shot here and made up is that the fact that she's heavily pregnant it makes her more powerful. Like, her pregnant belly is really accentuated, but she's carrying it with complete power. There's nothing meek about her appearance. And there is, and we've said this before, there is something a bit otherworldly about Stephanie Corneliuson anyway. But the way she plays this role right from the off, considering this is the first time we've seen her utter any lines in this role, you sort of feel like you know what this character is about in as much as we ever know what she's about from just this first exchange. It's worth noting that Martin Wallstrom and Stephanie Corneliuson are speaking their own respective languages in these scenes. So Martin Wallstrom is speaking Swedish and Stephanie Corneliuson is speaking Danish in these scenes, which I will admit, the first time I saw this, I had no conception of that whatsoever. I thought they were both Swedish.
When you watch Mr. Robot with the subtitles, when they're talking, the first subtitle that comes up says, speaking in Swedish, and that's it, so it doesn't allude to the fact that they're speaking different languages.
Right. So she asks where he's going. He tells her straight up he's going to this club. He says it's to do with work. She asks if it's necessary, and he says, everything I do is for us. And she says, us or you? And he says, us is me, which really makes me think of that old 80s horror movie, the body horror movie Society. Remember Society?
Oh, yeah. Society has one of the best best third acts I've
And
ever
to
seen.
be honest, Tyrell and Joanna would be a perfect couple in that community. I also want to say the way this scene is directed, the use of dramatic pauses between lines in this scene really just kind of soaking us into just how weird this couple is and how weird they are individually.
It's got major European art house vibes
It
whenever
does,
they talk
yeah.
to each other in Swedish.
Yeah. The pauses are worthy of Samuel Beckett in places. The whole way that's staged is so great. So Elliot is over at Shayla's. He mentions Gideon's dinner invitation. He says, I thought you could come as my girlfriend. Just straight out blurts it out. And Shayla's like, what the fuck? Are you actually asking me to be your girlfriend right now?
And he says, yeah, I'm not good in social situations.
It's like, no shit, bro. You mean like this one right now? And she says, there is something seriously wrong with you. You have no idea how right you are, Shayla. But she's very concerned about this whole idea of entering into any romantic entanglement right now. She says, I'm not going to be used anymore. Why don't you take that girl from this morning, meaning Darlene? She seems like she might want to go to some stupid posh dinner party. I loll at this now, because I imagine Darlene at some posh dinner party, and at least one thing would be getting thieved from Gideon's house, and all the other attendees would be insulted to their face at least once. Shayla says, you don't even really know me, and this is where Elliot cuts in with his voiceover to us, giving the usual, well, actually, of course I do, because I know everyone, because the same way I know her the same way I know everyone, because I hacked her with a phishing scam the day she moved in, yada yada. And she sort of cuts him off by saying, I don't mean the stuff you can find online, I mean the real me.
I'm not going to lie, I thought that the way that Shayla interrupts his inner monologue was really fucking romantic.
I love this whole scene, actually. It's a really beautiful scene with Shayla where she takes out these tapestries that she's made. I've made a note here for Matt Quayle at his dreamiest, most evocative. I really love the soundtrack in this scene.
Yeah.
It goes beautifully with the warmth and the lighting of the scene as well. There's just some gorgeous stuff going on here.
Pay attention to this fucking Christopher Nolan. This is how you mix different levels of dialogue and music in a scene.
Yeah, for sure. For realsies. Elliot tells us as he's looking at the tapestries, he's never seen these before. And Shayla's like, I never put it online. And Elliot tells us saying she has her own private maze too. And this seems to kind of blow open Elliot's world in a way, because he realises there is a life, there is depths of experience beyond what he can access. And as much as he can access, in some cases, the most intimate aspects of people's lives, there are people out there nonetheless who are still able to erect a kind of real life firewall around their inner selves, and it's a zone he cannot enter unless he's granted permission away from keyboard. Sheila being very self-effacing, saying her work is corny. It's very cute. Sheila's very cute in this scene. Elliot tells us her bug was always elusive to him. Maybe this is a facade of normalcy, but stuck on the outer fringes, not knowing how to participate, just like me. Oh.
It's like they're perfect for each other.
Yeah, and it's super cuteness as they're staring into each other, and Elliot goes to ask if he can kiss her, and she lunges in, and then she says, "Don't ask next time, it's lame." I'm not sure that's great advice. I mean, it's fine in the context of this one relationship, but I don't know, I'd be carrying around that advice for the rest of my life. Make sure people are compliant, is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Consent is key, guys.
Consent's kind of an important thing. Incidentally, I made a note here. This is not the last time we'll see Sheila give well-meaning advice to another character that might end up inspiring some ill-advised actions, but more on that later. Bugs usually get a bad rap, Elliot tells us, but sometimes when a bug makes itself known, it can be exhilarating. As Sheila at the end of the scene says, "Just don't let me down," and I've written bra moment.
I've written sad reacts only.
Yeah. Oh.
Because, yeah, she's going to be let down in the worst possible way. Press F, guys.
Yep. So Elliot's voiceover continues talking about unlocking grand opportunities, and this is nicely overlaid on the scene of Price's receptionist at the club, and Tyrell is hanging about, and this is where Tyrell's going to take his opportunity. Tyrell says to the receptionist that, "I'm here because you are. I think you're beautiful. I want to take you home." And the guy's like, "I thought you were married." And Tyrell takes Sheila's advice. Just leans in for that kiss. And Elliot's voiceover continues to tell us that a bug's only purpose, his whole reason for existing, is to be a mistake that needs fixing. Oh, God. And this is just Elliot talking about himself. All the bugs, his entire persona, personally and socially and macro, are just born of damage that's sort of yearning to be repaired. It also draws a direct parallel again between Tyrell and Elliot. I've written here in my notes just in capitals, "Damn, this show is good." Yeah, a quick note on Tyrelliot, the Tyrelliot theory, because that never seemed to die, that theory. If for anybody listening to this who does not know what that is, it's the idea that Tyrell is one of Elliot's personalities, one of his alters.
And it still appears now and again on Mr. Robot message
There
boards.
are people now, even after the series has ended, with all its revelations and all the I's dotted and T's crossed, are still committed to this theory, which, fair play being committed to something like that, but I think the show makes it pretty starkly clear that that's not possible. But certainly in these early episodes, it's doing enough work to draw these parallels that by the time we find out Mr. Robot is an alter of Elliot, I can see why people's minds leapt to this idea that maybe Tyrell is also an alter, and maybe Elliot is in fact a high-ranking member of E-Corps itself, and so he's got these two distinct personalities that sometimes work against each other and sometimes work in tandem. And because essentially that's sort of the relationship between Mr. Robot and the Mastermind. So for a brief moment, for a brief window, I think it kind of works. But even in that window, though, there are so many things that the show tells us about Tyrell's real life that I don't know how you can possibly square those circles.
Plus, if you, like, when you find out that Mr. Robot and Elliot, sorry, quote-unquote Elliot, are the same person, if you think back and go, then Tyrell's one. If you went back, because in this scene he's at a club, and then he goes to Gideon's dinner party, and then he sneaks out of Gideon's dinner party for a cigarette, goes and fucks that guy, plants the thing, goes back, it's like,
The only way to square that would be as if you came to the conclusion that the show was playing fuckery with the timeline. That's the only way that would work. In which case, it would be really bad faith writing and filmmaking by the show in that case, because it wouldn't be being honest with the viewer. And I think one thing this show is always honest with the viewer. It conceals what it needs to conceal, but everything else it plays by the rules.
And when you know the rules and you watch it, it makes sense.
Yes.
It doesn't bend its own rules. Another thing I noticed, I've got a note here, not especially about this episode, but I'll carry on. The number of characters in this show at the moment who by the season 4 are dead is unreal. Like, people go on about like George R.R. Martin, Game of Thrones killing off characters, but holy shit, when you watch back these early seasons of Mr. Robot, you're like, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you die horribly.
It's like somebody quickly assemble a quick edit of one of the Oscars in memoriam, just so we can all appreciate these characters as they take their final bow.
Someone do like a Fargo season 4 montage.
Right, yeah, it's crazy. Very few of these characters make it out alive. Okay, some classic Lynchian awkwardness. Okay, you better take a drink. Outside Gideon's apartment, as the All-Safers are waiting for the door to be answered.
That fucking door.
Now, this reminds me of two things. This scene, every time I see it on the stairwell in front of the door, the big fuck-off iron door. Firstly, it reminds me a wee bit of Felix Dawkins' apartment in Orphan Black.
Yeah.
It's got that energy that he locks with a screwdriver, which I always thought was a beautiful touch. The other thing it reminds me of, this is a bit of an obscure one, but it reminds me of it every single time. In Twin Peaks Season 2, when Dwayne Milford turns up at the sheriff's station with the shotgun and threatens to shoot Lana Budding, and Agent Cooper has the idea to leave the two of them together in the conference room to sort things out, knowing full well that Dwayne will probably fall in love with Lana. And Cooper and Harry Truman and Andy and Dr. Jacoby are all standing outside the door of the conference room waiting, and they're like, it's hard, isn't it? Waiting. And it's just such a weird screwball energy. This scene reminds me of that totally. But anyway, I was take 2 drinks for that one.
That was a Twin Peaks reference for you cool kids out there.
I can't help but feel that Gideon and his husband are kind of dicks here. Like, you did not think of checking the door, bro. You knew the doorbell was broken.
Tell them in advance.
Yeah, warn them in advance that the fucking doorbell doesn't work. Maybe tell them to phone ahead. Yeah, you did not think this through. So Angela says to Elliot, don't you think you should introduce us? And Elliot awkwardly does so, introduce them to Shayla. Ollie with the most insincere, you look lovely this evening. Lloyd turns up in a killer suit. He's like, what's up, guys?
No
Ollie
date,
says, deadpan, nice suit. And Lloyd, without missing a beat, immediately just takes it as a compliment. Thanks, dude. Ollie insists on knocking and doorbelling again. Eventually, Gideon's husband. Oh, I meant to note down the name of Gideon's husband. Did you get his name?
Gideon's husband's name is Harry, as portrayed by the actor Randy Harrison. This is his first of only 2 appearances. Do you even research, bro?
Alright, thanks, Hamilton. Could have been politer about it.
I think she's still a bit hungover from that AI Christmas party from her Christmas episode.
Yeah, she needs to get some of Romero's aunt's hangover cure down her. That's what she needs.
Either that, or maybe this is going to be the Hamilton's energy for 2021.
So he's wearing what looks like a proper CNA sweater in any case, and me a la Ollie, I'm like, nice sweater, bro. So he says, bell's broken, should have warned you. I'm like, yeah, you should have. I also don't like his line here. He says it's always nice to put a face to an employee badge number. Like, I know he's kind of joking, but it just seems a really inappropriate joke to make.
And, like, as if Gideon talks about his employees by their badge numbers.
He doesn't even work for Allsafe, so does Gideon come back? Because we're like, so badge number such and such today. He saved the company. It's like, you think you should mention the guy's name. So anyway, Harry asks how long Ollie and Angela have been together. It's that beautifully awkward moment.
Do you want to try it? You go at Ollie, I'll go Angela. After 3.
Yep.
1, 2, 3. 2 years.
2.5 years. It's been 2 now. And there's that awkward pause, and Harry's just like, okay then. And Elliot, how about you and Sheila? Elliot's just straight up, I think just today. It's the use of I think that I think is my favourite thing about that line. I think just today. And Angela punctuates the conversation with just a massive pour of wine at that point. The staging here is so great. And I know we've been saying that a lot about this episode, but it is pure sitcom. It's interesting the way the show really skates over these different kind of tones, and it never really disrupts the integrity of the show. And Gideon coming on with full cheese ball. Enough grilling of the guests. Let's check on the real grill.
It gave me sort of live theatre vibes again, but not like season 4. It gave me sort of like if you're watching a production of Barefoot in the Park or something, you know, it's sort of slightly screwball, I guess sitcom-y, like stage play, just the way like
Like
it's
kind
all
of Neil
staged.
Simon type thing.
Yeah, so getting big Neil Simon vibes from this scene.
You can call him Al. No way, that's never mind.
Hello, darkness.
Hello, Dark Army, my old friend.
We'll get to remember that for a future episode title.
So outside on I guess you'd call it a patio of sorts, Gideon admits to Elliot that he had someone analyse the DAT server in Dallas again. And Elliot's like, to us, oh Gideon, what did you do? Gideon says, there was nothing, don't know why I was suspicious, what possible motivation would you have? I was just being an idiot. And Elliot's telling us, Gideon has to let this go. If he gets too close, I don't think I can save him from it. I have to kill any suspicion. And of
we
course,
know.
this foreshadows Gideon's eventual death.
Yeah.
Press F for Gideon.
Gideon doesn't even die for doing it, though, you know?
No, that's true. Yeah, it's just some random balloon. But it's all part of the Pandora's box that the hack opened. Gideon apologises for doubting him. Says, you're nothing but a hard worker. Now, there's so much about that line.
Yeah.
I mean, Elliot is a hard worker, but not in the way that Gideon thinks. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like this, but when you have a supervisor who does become a bit fond of you, it's always a wee bit of a weird relationship, because in all of these kind of relationships, there is always that power imbalance.
Yeah.
Your boss can never be your friend. And newsflash for anyone who listens to this, and you think your boss is your friend is not your friend. And by that, I don't mean that your boss is secretly plotting your downfall or anything. I just mean that the power balance is so skew with that it's impossible to cultivate an actual friendship in that context. It's the same way that I think romantic relationships where there's a big power imbalance are just kind of icky. And it's why the whole idea, I think, of being friends with your boss is just a bit weird. And Gideon seems like a decent enough guy, bit of a blando, but decent enough. But that doesn't help. In this kind of thing where he's trying to get close to Elliot, and we know Elliot is not particularly keen on that anyway, but I think the artifice of it, even though Gideon might be feeling genuine about it, it feels artificial because Elliot's entirely aware of that power imbalance. It kind of chimes with the wider context about Elliot's own relationship with his peers in a way. There is also kind of a tragedy at work, though, that even if you were to ignore the power imbalance, all of Elliot's personal connections are, in a sense, hijacked by his need to conceal the truth about F-Society at this point. So it's kind of ironic that he's now in a situation where people sort of want to be his friend, and he can't, because if he did, they'd essentially be all fucked, they'd all be in danger. So he says he was worried about that file not being the right one. He didn't want to get Gideon's hopes up. That's the excuse he comes up with. That's why he didn't tell him before the meeting. He's just playing up the idea of a mutual closeness after Gideon having come out to him on the plane back from Dallas. And Elliot says to us, shit, I'm going to have to let him hug me, aren't I? And Gideon says, you don't have to hide anything from me. I care about you. And it's like, oh, man. So the party winds on. Elliot and Angela are by the window. They're having a wee reminisce. Angela here brings up Claudia Kincaid, who is a character from the mixed up files of Mrs. Basil Lee Frank Weiler by
Although
E.L. Konigsberg.
she misnames the book, misses out the misses. I noticed she calls it From the Mixed Up Files of Basil Lee Frankenweiler.
Oh, God's sake, Angela, hand in your Stan badge immediately. And if you're not familiar with that book, it's basically about two siblings who run away from home to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. It kind of prefigures the reveal of Angela and Elliot's similar adventure in season 4, and this is kind of what inspired them to do it. E.L. Konigsberg, incidentally, was a very highly respected writer of children's literature in the US, and if you're an American listening to this, I'm sure you already know that, so you don't need me to explain it. But one of the funny things about the inspiration behind that book, I remember reading about this ages ago, E.L. Konigsberg was at the Metropolitan Museum, and when she was there, she saw a popcorn kernel lying in the middle of the floor, and she thought to herself, who would be eating popcorn in this museum? And she immediately thought, This shows you the way that the mind of a children's author works, because she immediately thought, it's exactly the kind of thing my kids would do if they ran away, and this is the kind of place they would hide out in, and they would just live on popcorn. And I just think that's a fun note in terms of the relationship of this book to Mr. Robot, because the way popcorn continually comes up in Mr. Robot, specifically in reference to Elliot's memories of his father at the cinema, and also the gun and the popcorn dispenser at Fun Society. And it also reminds me of Kernel Panic. So anyway,
Nice.
so we learn this, that Elliot and Angela used to run off to that museum together more than once when they were kids. Angela says, I wanted to be Claudia Kincaid so bad, even her name was cool. Elliot recalls them accidentally having gone to the Queen's Museum instead. He says there was no Google Maps back then, which sort of again reinforces Elliot's need for a computer interface in order to be in control.
Angela says she always loved running away with you, and I immediately got run away with me in my head at that point.
Ah, yes, of course you did. She says somehow when you're 8, running away can be fun. And, you know, both Angela and Elliot have in their different ways been running away inside themselves since then, and it's not been fun. Elliot is telling us this normal life, smiles, dinner parties, childhood stories. I could get used to this, maybe even like it. And you feel at this point that the real unified Elliot is kind of reverberating with this, maybe rattling a wee bit with his tin cup at the bars of the loop. Elliot receives a text, looks a bit perturbed, switches on the TV. fSobriety have released a bunch of emails. Terry Colby is one of 3 high-level executives involved in the cover-up of the Washington Township toxic waste scandal. I think this is the first mention we get of Washington Township.
I've got it down in capital letters. This is where it starts.
Yeah. So Terry Colby may be facing more indictments, and so we now know Colby is one of the people directly responsible for the deaths of Angela's mum and Elliot's dad. Class action was previously dismissed against Ecor because of a lack of direct evidence, and Ecor crushed it, basically. Must have been their most annoying lawyers that crushed it. The emails reveal that Colby was aware of the dangerous levels of toxicity, kept it secret as it would not be cost effective to retool the current systems in place, even if there are potential losses. Here's what I love about this, and it's what I loved about this revelation even the very first time I saw it. This revelation is not treated as being some kind of crazy, aberrant conspiracy. It simply was an off-the-cuff thing that happened in a boardroom meeting.
I don't want to be the guy who compares Mr. Robot to Fight Club, because there's enough of those guys. Right. But there is that part in Fight Club where you find out what Jack/Tyler Durden's job is, and it's to apply the formula in car crashes. And it's, should we recall the cars that have this fault in them? If we do that, will it cost the company more money than to pay out in lawsuits?
Yeah.
And if the cost of doing a recall exceeds the projected cost of payouts for lawsuits, then they don't do
exactly.
a recall.
And that's the reality of capitalism. It's profit basically trumps everything else. But moving on. So, Mr. Robot, this is clearly a trump card from Mr. Robot, because he's stoking up the mastermind's desire here for righteous revenge, and he clearly dropped that mention of Elliot's dad earlier to prep him for this, to put him in the right frame of mind where forgiving his father is at the forefront in the mastermind's mind. So we can sort of imagine Mr. Robot kind of recalling the whole thing about Elliot being the key, saying, "See, what did I say?" As Afro dancehall artist Mandy May would say.
Yeah. Wait a minute.
Wait,
Afro dancehall artist?
Is this an episode of fSobriety?
I think it might be.
Roll the music.
Give us a break! Give us a break!
Hello and welcome to another edition of fSobriety, the podcast in which I, Craig Woods, try and lead James by the hand into the world of reggae music to which he is historically resistant.
Yeah, man.
Okay, I was not prepared for that. Okay, I'm serving up something today that I think is going to be a bit more accessible. We're back on the accessible train. We'll see how it goes though. So this is a little ditty called What Did I Say? by a young Afro dancehall artist called Mandy May from Zimbabwe. This, however, is from her most recent EP, which is very, very roots reggae influenced. It still has a dancehall vibe mainly, but it is steeped in some reggae roots sounds, and it's got a lot of that vibe going on. This, however, is a complete bop. Her voice is amazing, and just the rhythm of it, the melody of it is so irresistible that you're surely not human if you're able to resist. James, hit that play button.
Wait, would you describe me as a cold robot if I'm not into this?
A proper Terrell.
Okay, here we go. I am pressing play now.
Them a talk. Why a talk? This one a bad girl edition. Still a talk.
For first-time listeners who may be wondering what's going on, by which I mean the track fading out, not the sudden appearance of a reggae music-themed mini-podcast within a Mr. Robot review podcast. For copyright purposes we cannot play you the full song, but we do encourage you to check out the artist and track for yourself. Link in the podcast description.
Mandy May, incidentally, is only 19 years old, which is crazy. Her voice is just sublime, though. How you feeling?
It's grooving. There is a groove. It's got that big bass.
Yeah, big bass all day long. I like big bass, and I cannot lie.
I'm all about that bass. Was it just keeping it Mr. Robot-y there? Yeah.
Yeah?
I like the voice.
Yeah,
She's got a very nice voice.
I knew the voice would win it over. Her voice is pretty great.
It's not a traditionally reggae-ish sounding voice.
No,
in
that's
my
true. Yeah.
humble opinion.
I think also the fact she is Zimbabwean and she is singing, however, in Jamaican patois, but the way that she phrases is very unique. It's very unusual.
Yeah. Oh, there is an occasional drum fill, which is, as a drummer, screams reggae in my face. Screams
Reggae in my face.
Sean Connery screaming reggae from beyond the grave at me.
Shocking.
It's nice. There's some nice little synth notes in the background there.
It's a nice production. There's some nice things going on, some nice textures. It's very modern, very clean, but the groove, it's not too clean because the groove does a lot of the work.
I like it.
Yeah, there you go. How many 5s out of 9 for Mandy May's What Did I Say?
Mandy Mays, What Did I Say? gets a strong 7.5.
Oh, I think that may be our highest score, is it?
I think so, yeah.
That's pretty high. Alright, good. That is a definite win.
That's a win for Mandy May. So how can people find out more about Mandy May? I guess they could read the links that you're going to put into the episode description, but if they've skipped right over it and haven't followed their arse.
Well, just a reminder, I have definitely put the link in of this very song into the show notes of this podcast episode. And beyond that, I'm sure you all know how to do a Google by now.
It's Mandy, M-A-N-D-I-E.
Yep, and May, M-A-E.
Yep. Check it out.
Alright, go on your cell, Mandy. And that has been another edition of fSobriety. Toodle pip.
Axel, take us out.
Give us a break! Give us a break!
Oh, good app. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Those guys sure know a lot about reggae, or one of them sure knows a lot about reggae music.
The other one is sure listening to a lot of reggae that he otherwise wouldn't have listened to. Elliot tells us, my perfect maze, it's crumbling before my eyes, nothing to hide behind. I didn't think it existed, but there it was. Mr. Robot finally found my bug. It's kind of funny looking back on that now, because this is only the first of Elliot's very many bugs. So we see Angela is profoundly affected by this also. Ollie, classic, completely clueless. Angela sums it up. She says, I'd rather you didn't come with me. She tries to follow Elliot. Okay, get a street corner here, the bus stop, where a flashback is sort of playing out.
Before you lay out this flashback,
I hear vapings.
sorry, I was just enjoying my cigarette.
Guest appearance from Magda Alderson.
Who currently has no name in the show.
Yeah, her
She's
name has
still
not
at
been
this-
mentioned.
Yeah, it's still at this point just as credited as
Just
Elliot's
Mom.
mother. Yeah.
So we get the flashback playing out here. So Magda is telling young Elliot, Elliot's what, like 8 years old at this point, somewhere in that region. She says, don't be sad, speaking about Edward Alderson. He did this to himself. He was a coward. He was weak and pathetic, and in the end, that's what killed your father. Now, before I go any further with this, Magda, it has to be said, remains an enigma even after the end of the show. And I know we addressed this a wee bit before, but there's so much we do not know about her, and there's so much about what we are presented with regards to her that I don't know how much of it we can trust, because it's all from Elliot's perspective. Now, in the context of this scene here, seemingly on the surface it seems like she's saying, because Edward did not seek proper care and he didn't try to fight Icor, that made him weak. But is there more to this? Because even though Magda herself, by as much as we can tell, most accounts that we have, was also an abuser, was she aware of Edward's abuse? And therefore, is that part of the weakness that she's scornful of in this scene? I suppose it's kind of the Sarah Palmer question. Take a drink. Sarah Palmer, that's a Twin Peaks reference. Because we always ask that about Sarah Palmer, especially after we saw Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me, because it made it sort of clear that Sarah Palmer seemed to at least very much suspect that Leland was up to no good. Therefore, we started asking, how much did she know? Does she have guilt that she knew? I think even back in the day we were saying, is there a possibility she was even complicit? In a way, David Lynch and Mark Frost sort of upped the ante on those musings with Twin Peaks: The Return in ways that I won't talk about here because of spoilers and whatnot. Well, maybe I will, actually. If you've not watched Twin Peaks: The Return and you fancy watching it, skip over a few seconds here. I'm just going to say this real quick. Just imagining a deleted scene from Mr. Robot where Magda removes her own face and says, do you really want to fuck with this? And inside her face there's a black void with Elliot's childhood bedroom key floating in the middle.
I could see that.
So, but it's something I'm always aware of now whenever I look at these scenes with Magda. How much did she know? And is her criticism of Edward partly guided by the fact she knew he was also an abuser?
How much of this is projection of her being, as we found out later, another personality of Elliot, and how much is this just straight memory, like straight flashback?
Yes,
you know?
Indeed, that is the other question. I mean, we don't know what the delineation is between real memories of Magda and the persona that is represented by Magda as an avatar that's kind of there to punish Elliot. Yeah, who knows? It's it's a very difficult question to consider.
I feel like the bus stop scene is probably a flashback.
I
more
feel
than
like
anything.
that is a flashback, yeah, because it places an event that very definitely would have happened. Like, we know this is just after Edward has died, so it wouldn't make sense to present this in this way, I don't think, unless it was at least based on a real event. Young Elliot asks her, why aren't you crying? And she says, don't ask him many questions, there's no point in missing him. And if you do, you're as weak as he was. So one of the questions I guess I have, is she glad to be rid of Edward? As in glad his particular form of abuse is over? And is she saying it's a sign of weakness to sympathise with your abuser? Is that part of what it is? I feel like that could be it. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is pure error 404, self-awareness not found, if that's the case. Being that she, as far as we can tell, was also an abuser, albeit of a different kind. But I feel like the kind of abuse that Edward was guilty of is a very particular kind of abuse, let's just say. And I think most people on Earth are automatically in a state of revulsion in the face of finding out about that kind of thing. It doesn't matter what your morals are otherwise, you know. It's a difficult one. It's one of the few things that I think the show, for all it tied up so many loose ends at the end, there's just enough left unanswered, and I love the fact that we can kind of still speculate about this stuff. To call back your reference from earlier, she ends the scene by saying, there's no need to be sad, it's a beautiful night, the weather's nice, and I'm enjoying my cigarette.
Such a weird thing to say.
It really is. That's also a wee bit Lynchian as well, I think, just that line of dialogue. So the bus drives off, and as it departs the screen, we're back in present day, and it's present day Elliot sitting at the bus stop. He tells us the bug forces software to adapt, evolving into something new because of it. which in a way is a sort of perfect description of Elliot's mental state and its own origins, and also the juxtaposition in the Magda scene shows us at least one side of that origin. So is it also a commentary on Magda's own mental state as per the above? Possibly, because maybe part of her bug is realising she lived with an abuser. Is that what made her an abuser? Who knows? Human psychology isn't a complicated thing, and I think all of these are possible, and I guess we're just free to choose whichever interpretation we like best. I don't know that I can settle on one, because every time I watch these scenes I see something different, and it fires off something in my brain that makes me see it slightly differently. How about you?
You're right about Magda being such a difficult character to figure out.
She's maybe, in a weird way, and considering what everything else that takes place in the show, she's maybe the biggest enigma that's left at the end of the show.
Yeah, everything else is sort of wrapped up in a bow, but there's still that sort of kind of what-ifs about Magda's appearances, because we never once see what we know for certain to be this is who Magda is, other than when she's in the home. You know, we don't know anything else about her presently.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's such a weird...
And of course, Esmail renders her mute in present day. He's properly trolling us by that point. It's like, fuck you, Sam. But yeah, in any case, no matter what way you cut it, I think all the dialogue around here and the voiceover from Elliot in these scenes as well, it's presenting us with so many sort of quite perfect analogies for the way in which trauma leads to mental illness, and where behavioural patterns become so ingrained that the personality builds itself around what you could call mutations, you know, turning neuroses into defence mechanisms, even though those mechanisms are in fact detrimental ultimately to the mental health in the long term, a la the mastermind existing to carry Elliot's anger and his sense of injustice, why Mr. Robot exists to protect Elliot at all costs, even though he does many things which endangers Elliot. Yeah, but I like the way it's bookended by Elliot's comment that it's always the next version, the inevitable upgrade.
Yeah.
I love the irony of that. Alright, so Terrell and Pricey's receptionist in the latter's apartment, having a bit of a tryst, shall we say. Post-ejaculation, Terrell, I love the way he checks his own pulse with his watch. Almost as if like any form of loss of physical control, even if it's only momentary in response to his own desires, is somehow abhorrent, and he's got to quickly reassert his equilibrium. Wallstrom, again, just hitting it right out of the park with this performance. Equal parts animalistic and robotic, and it's a difficult balance to get right. But like the guy says, you're a strange creature, and he says, I'm just a businessman. Which, again, might be the most truthful thing Terrell has said in this encounter, because this whole thing is essentially business. He insists that the guy take a shower, clearly just as a ruse so he can take the opportunity to hack his phone. I also think he is genuinely perturbed by the grime and the immediate loss of control it represents.
Yeah, I love this. He's like, well, that's as clean as I'm going to get you.
Yeah. Why don't you come in here? I'll be right there, he says, getting dressed and hurrying out the door.
The whole, I'll be right there. Bye.
Doodle pip.
It really is just business for him at this point. He's like, okay, I've done what I need to do. And also, I think this is the first time we get to see a little bit of Tyrell's super hacksaw abilities too.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's the first time we see him carry out something like this. And I guess it hammers home to us for the first time that Terrell, and again, it's hammering home that parallel between Elliot and Terrell, that they are both geniuses at this stuff. It's actually something I always love about the show. It's something I don't know if you relate to this at all, but one thing I really love about televisual entertainment when I'm invested in a character who is really proficient at a thing that I'm not remotely proficient at, there's something really thrilling about watching people just be good at shit.
Yeah.
And it's like those scenes where Elliot is, in front of his keyboard typing at high speed, and he's explaining things at high speed that I'm never going to understand. And the way it's all put together with the fast pacing, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is amazing. This person is a god. And Terrell, even just in this quick hack, the way he's so kind of relaxed, knowing he has exactly the right amount of time to do what he needs to do here. Yeah, I love all that shit. It gets me off, man.
It's the same as watching like a really good fight scene or something in a kung fu movie. You're like, I could never do that. This is amazing.
I remember, I forget who the critic was, but they coined it competency porn. And I totally relate to that. There is just something quite exciting about watching people be really good at shit. Okay, meanwhile, the dejected Ollie. Angela returns to their apartment, apologises for having run off, and he's like, did you talk to Elliot? She says he wasn't home, and he's like, well, I'm here. And she said, well, I do want to talk to you, just not now. And Ollie gives it the whole jealous boy. You'll talk to him, but not me.
He be's the worst, as I've got down in my notes.
He continues to commit himself to the pursuit of worstness. Angela explains that both their parents died, so it's different. They have a different relationship, and she doesn't want to talk about it. And Ollie's delivery here was, what if I want to talk about something? And here is where he fesses up about having been hacked by Cisco, and simultaneously also has to fess up about Arizona Fred / Stella. And Angela is looking through everything, sees all the naked pics of Stella, and Ollie says, you don't have to put yourself through this. I don't know why you keep looking at it. I still love you. And Angela's delivery of stop speaking, it's just so on point. It's funny how pragmatic she's been at this point. I think that was the first thing that surprised me the first time I saw this show, was that at this moment there is a pragmatic thing that just takes over in Angela's head here. And she immediately turns to him and says, we need to break up, at which point I'm inwardly cheering. And the line, which I've always loved, maybe my problem is I can't be with a guy with your problem. So Cisco has their bank accounts and also that of Angela's dad, because Angela had been using the laptop to deal with her student loan repayments through her dad's account. So Angela realises the only way to deal with this is by doing what Cisco says, otherwise they're completely fucked. It's another great exchange here. Ollie says, I'll lose my job, and Angela says, and there it is.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
He tries to chase it up with, you'll lose your job too. It's like, yeah, good save, bro.
Yeah, he's like, if that matters.
Now, Angela appears to have a little wobble after that, and Ollie says they'll fix this, and she claims she doesn't want to break up. She's sorry she said that. I'm going to put my hands up here and say, the first time I ever watched this, I thought Angela was being genuine there.
Oh, you bought it?
I did, and I was really disappointed because I was like, no, come on, don't stick with this arsehole. And I felt like that was one of the tricks the show pulled in the next episode. The first time I saw it, I was like, oh no, wait, she's actually going to totally fuck over Ollie. Good show, Angela. But I remember the first time I watched this episode, I was like, she hasn't got the guts to go through it.
I always figured that she was fucking Ollie over, and I was super happy about it. But I've written down in my notes here, give all the Emmys for Best Actress to Angela Moss.
Yeah, I think I'm just prepared to be disappointed by people constantly, so I just assumed she wasn't going to break up with Ollie. We see Gideon in his office, clearly thinking about this whole thing about the release of the E-Core emails. He makes a phone call. Oh, Gideon, he's back to asking about the server again.
Yep, having a sign of his own death warrant again.
Yep. Yep. Let me just go over that signature again. Let me make sure that was right. Terrell returns home to find Joanna spread-eagled on their bed in her lingerie, and Terrell says, really? Tonight? And Joanna's all like, why not? He says he's tired. Joanna is, shall we say, insistent. I want to call out again here, all the scenes in the Wellick's apartment, cinematography, production design, acting style, it is sort of pure Cronenberg meets Antonioni on a joint J.G. Ballard adaptation. Everything is sort of glacial and remote, including the passion of the characters. It's all the pale metallic blues and greys. And Stephanie Cornelius herself just has that classic European actress aesthetic. This show generally is just such a great melange of elements that I don't think any other mainstream show of this era quite achieved in the same way. Terrell tells her he's discovered Scott Knowles as the pick for CTO, obviously through this hack. So Joanna immediately just insists, well, let's have dinner ASAP. And Terrell says, isn't that a bit obvious? And she says, we don't have time to play coy. And this lets us know right away, this couple are completely equal. These two characters are on equal footing with each other. One is not in charge of the other. They've both got exactly the same goals. They're both very sort of predatory. But there is that strong sense of partnership and kinship, which for me, from the first time I saw this, just made them such compelling characters.
It's like what he says earlier in the episode, is like, us as me. They're so equal that they're basically one.
Yeah, it was no bullshit. It was a legit statement.
But that's not to say that they seem like the same character, because they have the wild differences that come to light later.
True, that's true.
But they're also just like, they make a great power couple / like villain couple.
Yeah, the weirdest, most sinister couple you could ever not hope to meet at a swingers party. So this sort of pseudo S&M scene begins to play out whilst relaying integral information to the plot. It's prime filmmaking. I absolutely love this stuff. I also really enjoy how Tyrell is worried about hurting Joanna, or hurting the baby. And it's so far the meekest we've seen him. And he says, just a little while, and she, completely toneless, just goes, mm-hmm. And we end on, it's always operatic music with the Wellets, because that's the only thing that fits. And that music segues with us as we go to Fun Society, where Darlene is bowling, Mr. Robot is reading, Elliot walks up wordlessly to the computer terminal, nobody is saying anything. And this is Mastermind Avenger mode activated.
Props to the actor who plays Mobley, his name I've forgotten. Because his sheer reverence at this point of just trying to clear the space for him, it spoke volumes.
Elliot has to do the minimum possible physically just to get everything sorted. And the final line of the episode, here is the plan. So good. Alright, so that was Season 1, Episode 3. What are we thinking in terms of 5s out of 9?
I'm going to give this... It's hard not to just give every episode of this show 9 5s out of 9. But I'm going to give this... do you know what? 8.5. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close.
It's not perfect, no, but it is close to perfect. I'm going to say 8. I'm going to try and be rational and level-headed. I'm saying 8 5s out of 9 for this episode. Pretty great no matter which way you cut it.
It's incredible. And again, sowing so many seeds that when you look back on it, having watched the whole series of like, should have seen that coming.
Yeah, it's one of the things generally with this first season. See, anytime rewatching it, I think, again, specifically with this rewatch for the purposes of this podcast, because I'm so much more tuned in to every little detail to pick out, to talk about. Just how much, and I don't think I appreciated it the first time around when I first saw the show, just how much world building is going on in these early episodes at the same time as having a really propulsive plot the whole time. Because there has not really been a dull moment in this show so far. We're now 3 episodes in, and every episode has felt compelling from start to finish. And I remember saying in the previous episode, episode 2 particularly packed so much information into it, but it does it in a way, and I think these episodes 3 and 4 do the same thing, where there's just so much going on in terms of the plot, in terms of how it grabs you, in terms of the propulsion of the plot, that you're not really consciously registering just how much actual information you'd be given that in a lesser show would be done through exposition. And that's something Mr. Robot does not do very much of, is exposition, which is incredible when you consider the amount of information that's been relayed in these first 3 episodes.
Also incredible considering how often there's an Elliot voiceover. That would be the easy way to just be like, here's what's going on.
That is an excellent point. I mean, one of the main criticisms of voiceover generally is that it is just a tool for exposition, whereas with Elliot, it's often a tool of obfuscation. Yeah, it's breaking so many rules, it's just crazy.
And again, at this point in the show, it could still be that hack of the week vigilante hacker show, just done in a really stylistic way.
Yeah,
it's not until you get to, I think, is about episode 7 or 8 of season 1 that you realise you've been presented with a puzzle box. And you're like, oh shit, this is a whole other thing.
Yeah, for real.
Well, I think before we go on to episode 4, we should hit the bar.
Hit the bar.
I know this little bar next door.
Alright, appletinis are on me. We'll be right back from this message from our corporate overlords.
If you see our logo, that means you can rest assured that you are buying the best food, clothing, shelter, transportation, hygiene, electronics, and life's necessities that money can buy.
What are you drinking tonight, James? Not the appletini.
I'm on my appletini.
You've downed it there. I'm not sure you're enjoying it.
I should have sipped it. For our listeners out there, hi guys, especially in Argentina.
Yep.
We've not forgotten about you.
Big love.
As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, tomorrow is my birthday. Normally this time of year we'd be at the Tron.
This is true. Not the Hamilton,
the other one.
The Tron Theatre Bar.
I would have gone to Nanakusa in Glasgow, had some food, and then hit the Tron, which obviously we can't do right now. So in honour of that, and in the fact that I like it, this evening from the wee bar next door, I've got some East Coast IPA.
James,
how about yourself?
I hope you're sitting comfortably.
Hang on, let me just strap in.
This is quite a monumental moment. For regular listeners, they'll know why. James, I am currently drinking East Coast IPA.
Genuinely, I thought you were going to say you were drinking South American red wine, but we've actually gone
for the first time in this podcast history. We are simpatico with our drinks.
It only took 10 episodes.
It's your birthday, man. What else would I be drinking? Cheers from beyond the grave.
Shout out to Green King Brewers.
Yep. Thanks for apologising.
Shout out to slavery apologists, Green King.
The good kind of slavery apologists.
We'll get that corporate sponsorship one day. I realised
they are our true corporate overlords.
Did you or I follow them on Twitter from the fSobriety account? Because I can't remember if I did
might have done.
But I noticed I hopped on the other day and I noticed that we were following Green King Brewers.
Yeah, it probably was me.
Right, I need to start spamming them with corporate sponsorship requests and thank them for apologising for slavery.
Yeah, thank you for lubricating our podcast. Mr. Robot Season 1, Episode 4, Daemons, including Damon Wayans,
Matt Damon,
Damon Albarn.
Written by Adam Penn and directed by Nisha Ganatra.
Nisha Ganatra, yes. So interesting pairing this. Adam Penn is a regular writer of American Horror Story.
Yep. Also credited as the writer of The Discreet Massacre of the Bourgeoisie.
Writer and director of The Discreet Massacre. The in-show schlock horror movie, slasher movie that Elliot and Darlene are such big fans of, and from where the mask doth come. So, yeah, Adam Penn, writer of AHS, it makes sense that he made that movie.
This is one of 3 episodes that he's written of the series. The other 2 being Season 2's Alf special.
That figures.
And Season 3's Episode 7, Frederick and Tanya. So,
oh, wow.
Adam Penn's written some pretty out there but also quite important episodes of this show.
Yeah. Nisha Ganatra, incidentally, is kind of an indie filmmaker. I know her mainly from... She made a movie called Chutney Popcorn about 20 years ago. That's another popcorn reference. Take another drink if you're counting those. Which is actually a pretty good movie. And I think it was maybe 99 or so it came out. And it's very of the time. But it's a good movie. It's about a queer Indian American woman who offers to be the surrogate for her sister's baby, basically. And interestingly, the infertile sister is played by Sakina Jaffrey, who is Antara Nayar in Mr. Robot, the lawyer that Angela meets up with this season.
Also noted for directing many episodes of America's Next Top Model, I noticed.
Interesting.
But this is a Canadian back-to-back. This is the 2nd episode of this show in a row directed by a Canadian.
I didn't realise that. There you go.
I'm all about the pointless trivia. You do the in-depth analysis. I do the pointless trivia.
If you want top pointless trivia, I'll give you one that is not real. But I was part of me was hoping it would be real just because I thought it would be funny. When I looked up Jim McKay, or Mackay as we would say in this part of the world, part of me was like, wasn't he an actor from early Hal Hartley movies? And there is an actor called Jim McKay who was in early Hal Hartley movies. He played Martin Donovan's abusive dad in Trust.
Ah, right.
And part of me was like, oh, that would be so cool. It'd be a great reference to make if it turns out it's the same person. Alas, it is not. Remember Hal Hartley? Remember when he was relevant? Ask your parents, kids. Ask your Gen X parents.
I had some Hal Hartley VHS.
Yeah, same.
Movies. What a guy. I can't stand the quiet.
I can't stand the quiet!
Sorry.
Hot fucking tuna.
Oh, man.
I used to love Martin Donovan. He was my shit back in the day. I loved that guy.
Man, still loved on it. Whenever Martin Donovan appears in anything.
Wasn't he in Big Little Lies?
He was in Big Little Lies.
I barely recognised. I was like, who made Martin Donovan old? This is unacceptable.
He was also in some big budget thing.
It was Ant-Man, I believe. The first Ant-Man movie, he was the villain.
I think he's in Tenet as well.
Oh, really? Yes, I'm glad he's still getting work in good movies. I say good movies, I mean movies that people will watch.
In big movies.
Yeah.
Season 1, Episode 4, Daemons. First things first. This is where I have questions and thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
and points.
I think I possibly have some of the same questions, thoughts, and points.
The question, thought, and point I have is that by the time you finish season 4 and you've watched the whole series, you realise that episode 4 is one of the most pivotal episodes in this entire show.
Yeah.
And it's neither written nor directed by Sam Esmail.
Yes, I did make that same note. It is interesting that... Yeah, it is an interesting one to think about. Who knows what the thought process was there? Who knows why Sam Esmail chose the episodes he chose in season 1 to direct? I mean, I think in a perfect world, he would have wanted to direct all the episodes. I don't really know the full reason why he ended up... It was the case that he was able to just say, you know what, this show is only continuing with me as the director. It was... I mean, it's not very common for this kind of thing to happen. It's not often that a show with a kind of standard 10 to 12, 13 episode season has the same director on every episode. You don't see it happen very often. I mean, the most I see right now, I think the first show that comes to mind is Euphoria, where the show creator Sam Levinson, great director, really visionary director, he directs most of the episodes, but I think there's like 2 or 3 in the first season that he doesn't direct. And that's kind of the pattern I see most of the time, is that the showrunner will direct most of the episodes, but usually the logistics are just a bit too complicated. So people say, to be able to direct an entire season. But then season 2, Mr. Robot, Sam Esmail is just saying, you know what, fuck this, I'm doing everything.
Yep. But it's the fact that I wonder how much, where the input is. I'm not an expert in Hollywood writing rooms. I'm not an expert in if someone is credited as having written an episode. How much is it Sam Esmail saying this happens in this episode, write it? Mm-hmm. Or did he deliberately not, did he give a bit and deliberately not want to be involved?
The way writers, this is always a bit of a, I think this is something that's commonly misunderstood, is that because the way the writer's credit works is it's the person who just puts the script together gets the writer's credit. But a writer's room, you've got a bunch of people just firing ideas at each other. And so the person who gets the writer's credit on the episode is not necessarily the person who put in the lion's share of the ideas. So it's entirely likely that Sam Esmail was very specific about certain scenes in this episode, but Adam Penn got the writer's credit because he wrote the screenplay.
That's kind of what I figured, because it would be weird otherwise that essentially the entire central plot, the core of this show...
it was a different writer that came up with it. Adam Penn, the true genius behind Mr. Robot. Yeah, you've been rumbled, Esmail.
Let's get into it. Let's begin with one line.
One line, yeah. So I mentioned for episode 3 that each episode does have its own kind of recurring motifs, and we get right into it in the first shot of this episode. The recurring motif for this episode is that line of morphine, and Elliot tells us that's all that's left. One line, the last line. Cool story, bro. And it also
Great
sort of
as fuck.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's pure shite being a junkie. One last line to cross as well, here's the other thing I noted about this episode. This is an episode that has a very clear A story, B story, and C story structure. Elliot's story is the A story, Darlene's story is the B story, and Angela's story is the C story.
Yeah.
And it's a very classic kind of structure. And yet this show is so off the wall that I did not even notice that really consciously the first few times I watched this. But again, you know, the more focused you are on the episodes as individual pieces, you start to notice these things a lot more. And each of those stories, each of those characters are all crossing a line to some extent in this episode. So the motif in this episode is really strong. So Elliot tells us this is everything that's come to this, and it's the consequences of everything he's done so far. Everything from busting Vera even to creating us. He tells fSobriety that data storage facilities like Steel Mountain use a kind of analog linear tape system. It's a bunch of jargon. In other words, Mobley sums it up. He's hitting a way to increase the temperature in Steel Mountain by hacking into the climate control system so as to corrupt the data without needing to blow it up. So they can install a circuit board behind a thermostat, plant in a back door, then create a VPN into the Steel Mountain intranet using the old Raspberry Pi, which is my favourite thing of all. Whenever I hear people talk about Raspberry Pis, even the IT, I remember talking to one of the IT guys at work about a Raspberry Pi because I just love the name, and he was very enthusiastic about telling me about how it worked, and I didn't understand a fucking word.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people talk about how they're the total bee's knees if you're getting into like computer nerd shit.
Yeah.
Sorry, anyone involved in IT.
No, we love it. We love it. We just are Luddites who don't understand it. Romero is best described as cynical. It says steel gates, armed guards, 24/7, CCTV. This is a waste of time. Mr. Robot says, "You sure you don't want to just blow it up?" And Elliot says, "All we need is one security flaw." Romero says the place is designed not to have any. And Elliot says, pointing at the photo of the exterior of Steel Mountain, "I see 6 walking around." Meaning, of course, the staff and whatnot. Humans, always the weakest element. Elliot has the withdrawal coughs, which Romero spots instantly for what it is. Elliot admits to us that he's broken his own rule, but on the basis of clinical depression, confusing relationships, day jobs, night jobs, not to mention taking down the largest corporation in the world, perhaps you'll cut me some slack. And he says, "And I chose all. This line has wanted to own me my whole life." He then he concentrates on the supply chain of the morphine getting to him. And it says, this is the first of many in Mr. Robot of evocations of the workings of logistics, and in this case, at their most nefarious. But there's a real obsession with this theme all throughout the show, because this is the first instance where we're really concerned about where things are physically going. And then there's later in this episode, there's the fact that the Steel Mountain is also going to be shipping its contents to other facilities, so that goes into another conversation about logistics. Season 3 has a whole thing about logistics when Elliot is trying to divert all of the paper records. This is something that comes back again and again, and it seems it works on a lot of metaphorical levels.
More like Mr. Stobart.
Eddie Robot. Yeah, that also is. It sort of nicely mirrors the really convoluted labyrinthine structure of Elliot's own persona at this point, which I also quite like that idea. But after all of this, he's still... I really love the intermittent repeats of, "This is the last line, I promise." It's like classic junkie behaviour.
Yep, he just needs that one and he'll be fine.
And we get the title card as he takes the almighty snort, and that is one of my favourite Mr. Robot title cards. "If I can get through the next couple of days, I'll be clean," he says. And we see Elliot hanging about outside his apartment, having left Fun Society. He's now walking flipper, and he's in full para mode. He sees a man in black.
My notes for this scene, Craig, is literally just the words, "Check the paragoon."
And as he sees a second guy approach from the opposite direction, he shouts at them both, "What do you want?" And 2 guys just kind of stop, look back. And it's interesting when you watch this the first time round, because there's a part of your brain that thinks, wait, are they watching him? Because they do stop and talk to each other. But when we look at it now, it's in all probability it's just 2 guys going, "Who the fuck is that fucknut?"
Yeah.
One of them probably saying to the other, "Yeah, I walked back here the other day and he did the same thing." He's here every day just shouting at cunts. He gets back in. It's a heavy knock at the door. It's Darlene. She says, "I would have saved you the trip to the door, but you're all against me, like breaking in or whatever." She notices the morphine dust and she's clearly concerned. Now that we know who Darlene is and what her deal is, we really feel the depth of that concern. And again, poor Darlene. So she drags him back to Fun Society. We only left there a couple of minutes ago, which is an interesting thing, because this is a quick, unexpected turnaround that you don't normally see in TV dramas. The language of this show, the way that was put together, it's like, well, ordinarily you're not going to see that scene again, that setting again, that location again, until at least later in the episode. But the show is literally saying to us, "No, wait, things are not quite right. This is not going as planned, and none of this is going to go the way you expect it to." Romero tells us the plan's not going to work. He's found out that E-Core are up in their security protocol, so they're copying all the analog backups to ship them to 5 other fortress-like storage centres. He puts it less politely than I did.
Yeah.
This plan is shit.
I love Romero in this episode. He's amazing.
He's amazing. He has several great lines in this episode. I love Ron Cephas-Jones. I know I sang his praises on our first Mr. Robot episode, but I love that guy. He's got such a great presence on screen. Does make me sad we don't get more Romero than we do. Elliot accidentally lets slip that he's spoken to Terrell, and Romero says, "So when did you become chums?" And Elliot's trying to stay all business. Says this isn't happening till April 1st. This is only the 29th. We still have a few days. So all the tapes are currently still in the New York facility. So Elliot thinks they still have time, but it means they have to do it right now. Mobley says he already has floor plans. And he thinks they can finish the rest on the road. Darlene and Trenton think they've got the networks just about sorted. Romero says, what about China? They need to be informed. And Darlene says, I'll hit up my Dark Army contact. And this is the first confirmation we get of a direct link between Darlene and Cisco. Although it won't be fleshed out till later in the episode.
Yeah, and its exact nature won't be revealed until we see. It's the first time we see Cisco not being this like cool Dark Army operative guy. We just see him being like, I wanted to spend my life with you. Is
a vulnerable human being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He crumbles in the face of Darlene Alderson, as you would.
Oh, who can blame him? So Romero is resistant, but Elliot, full mastermind confidence, says he'll go in, he'll do it. Romero says, you may hide it from these nerds, but I know a junkie when I see one. You ain't going to do jack or Jill except puke your brains out or give hand jobs for another high. Yeah, that line floored me, man.
It's so good.
Romero tells Mobley he doesn't trust Elliot, and Mobley's all about, it's not about trust. Romero hacks, is it his mom's van? Did I read that correctly?
No,
I
I think that he's hacking someone's, but I think he just calls her mum. Is it someone with a kid?
I see, okay.
Because we see...
Yeah, I was going to say that. I don't see how that would work. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So they hack the van and they're off-ski. In Fun Society, when Elliot confronts Mr. Robot, a nice bit of production design I noticed, sign above Elliot's head says no refunds. So he's definitely past the point of no return. He asks Mr. Robot if he's going to say anything. Mr. Robot's all like, you've got everything under control, which, we know the mastermind is in control at this point now. Elliot says it's not my operation. Now, on first viewing of this, it does just seem like Mr. Robot's nose is a wee bit out of joint.
Yeah, it read on first viewing as, oh, well, everyone's following you now, so I'll just fucking sit here.
But of course, now we know in the context, this is exactly Mr. Robot's plan. Mr. Robot says, you're the key to the whole thing, the only force of nature at play here, which is a great line. And I've written in all caps, road trip. So Elliot, a touch nauseous on the road. That dude does not travel well. Okay, so I'm going to just read out this monologue that Elliot has, because I think it's one of the best, most important ones. Definitely the best one in this episode.
There's a saying, the devil's at his strongest while we're looking the other way, like a program running in the background silently while we're busy doing other shit. Daemons, they call them. They perform action without user interaction. Monitoring, logging, notifications. Primal urges, repressed memories, unconscious habits. They're always there, always active. We can try to be right, we can try to be good, we can try to make a difference, but it's all bullshit. Because intentions are irrelevant. They don't drive us. Daemons do. And me, I've got more than most.
Which... that pretty much just explains the entire show.
Also, yeah, that was an excellent Elliot impression there. You must have been working
thanks.
on
I've been working on it, and I've been putting myself out for voiceover work lately. You got to branch out during this pandemic, man.
Got to retrain out of the arts.
Yeah, Rishi Sunak says I need to find another job. So, Elliot immediately violently pukes. So, as another example of Elliot again comparing subconscious human psychology to the workings of a computer, and we get a lot of that kind of stuff. I think maybe on my first viewing of this show, I was so focused on that metaphorical level of it that I was not really thinking about just how many truths Elliot was laying out here. Also, that squirt of Mobley's ketchup just gives me the bulk.
Like all the audio work and like the close-ups as he's about to... It is that thing where when you feel really sick, and everything's just fucking...
everything repulses you.
Yeah.
So they hit the motel. Elliot insists he'll be fine if he rests. Romero says, in a couple of hours you'll wish you felt as shitty as you do right now. Wait till the convulsions start. And we get the mad jittery time-lapse light type footage a la the convenience store or the Dutchman's in Twin Peaks Return. Take a drink. As Elliot's put into the bed, sweating and shivering. Yes, the shivering. My favourite Doctor Who villains. Shirtless Rami Malek klaxons. This guy clearly goes to a gym. But moving on. He tells us, don't be mad at me. I know I've slipped, but I'm about to change the world. And he repeats that again, so it's another mantra.
The weird way this is shot did make me think that maybe this is why, like, they got a director who's used to shooting something like America's Next Top Model, where it's always really weird and like flashy cuts between stuff, and like really, really stylized directing, because a lot of the stuff that happens in this episode from this point on is super fucking stylized. Yeah,
for sure. Alright, before we get there, back to Angela's apartment. Ollie's asleep. Angela is sneaking Ollie's pass into her bag. I've written Matt Quayle does a tense.
Oh yeah.
Which is hilarious, because this is Ollie. Where is the danger in Ollie? He wakes up, says, that's the way I like to get up in the morning. Screw coffee or breakfast in bed. God, this guy is the worst.
He says to her, when she says she's going out to meet her dad for brunch.
Yeah.
And he says, oh, I wanted
to take you for brunch.
It's like, you will be wined and dined until I feel that I'm out of the doghouse.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let myself off easy.
There's so many things wrong with it. I'm not going to let myself off easy. I'm going to let myself off by telling you I have compensated now.
Yeah, I have done the bare minimum.
Cookie for Ollie.
Yeah, so, and then Angela's like, cool story, Ollie. Bye.
She goes to visit Elliot, who of course is not there. She meets Shayla, who invites her to walk with Flipper. She says Flipper loves an audience when she pees. We don't plan our path, just wing it and see where the moment takes us. Elliot, meanwhile, in withdrawal, he's musing maybe this was intentional. It's the subconscious making him doubt what he got everyone else to believe in, turning him into the physical manifestation of his own fear of being. Which Romero muses by breaking in a goddamn waste. Romero and Mobley are watching Hackers.
Yeah, starring
1995 movie Hackers. If you don't know it, look it up.
Starring Matthew Lillard.
Yep, star of Twin Peaks Return.
Yep, also one of the most famous advocates and big time fans of Dungeons and Dragons. He's basically D&D royalty, is Matthew Lillard. Wait.
Oh, is this an episode of fSobriety?
No, it's not. Let's move on.
Oh, thank fuck. It also stars Johnny Lee Miller, and he is billed above Angelina Jolie in that movie.
Just to give you an idea of how early it was. But this was like basically, this was when Johnny Lee Miller started wrestling. Johnny Lee Miller, star of Trainspotting as well.
I think this is our third Trainspotting reference in this episode, by the way.
I'm assuming that none of the Trainspotting like sort of nods were accidental in this episode. Because a lot of like Elliot sort of lying sweating in the bed has big Trainspotting vibes.
It does, yeah, that's true. I have to say, by the way, I've not seen Hackers since 1995. Seeing it here, I'm shocked, man, how dated that movie looks.
Looks ridiculous.
It looks terrible.
As Romero says, I've been in this game 27 years and I've never seen a singing animated virus.
Hollywood hacker bullshit.
Yeah. And it hopefully says, I've yet to fly through a Tron City directory structure.
Yeah, some good bands there. The description of the virus running through the system, of course, echoes Elliot's withdrawal at the moment.
Yeah.
But all of that is so undercut. Romero says, I bet you right now some writer's working hard on a TV show that'll mess up this generation's idea of hacker culture.
Self-referential klaxon.
I see you, Sam. I see what you're doing. An Eco truck passes loudly by the window, which is a nice touch as we get the transition to the next scene. At Fun Society, Trenton tries on Darlene's scarf. Darlene says, all you had to do was ask, klepto. Trenton has the files ready. There's no word yet from the road. Darlene is freaking out because it's been 24 hours. Now, of course, in retrospect, realise she's freaking out of sisterly concern also. Trenton is worried this plan is way too ambitious. Darlene emphasises the need to hit China's data centre simultaneously, so if the Dark Army are not compliant, they can't do anything. Darlene then realises she forgot it's Sunday. She now realises she knows where Cisco will be. Trenton says she's worried these guys might be a bit dangerous, which in retrospect is a massive understatement. But she insists on coming along. Darlene says no. Trenton follows regardless.
This is the point where I'd actually forgotten about this, but before like my desire for a Darlene and Leon spin-off, I would have loved a Darlene and Trenton spin-off.
Yeah, we're in simpatico again, because I've made a note in my notes here at exactly this point. I love this dynamic so much between D and T. It makes me wish we got more of it. The little we get does a whole lot, but an entire subplot in every episode would be so welcome. I love these two characters. And then I've written, perhaps in the fSobriety comic book ? Which incidentally is supposedly still a thing that is happening at some point. And it's been published by Black Mask, which is a really interesting indie comic company. They produce a lot of really good stuff. But it's been on the slate since like season 3 was airing, and then I think it just got kind of knocked back because I think they just, for whatever reason, they just had too much going on and they realised they couldn't do it in time. But Sam Esmail was asked about it on Twitter lately, and he did say it is still happening. Yeah, I hope we at least get more of them. I remember, I seem to recall Sam Esmail did say it would deal with the origin of fSobriety more. Whether that's still the plan, I don't know. But as I say, he was asked about it on Twitter maybe just a few weeks back, and he did say that it was still happening.
All I know is I will read the shit out of that.
Samesies.
I will sniff it up like a big line of morphine.
This line of comics, the last line. In the part, Sheila gives Angela ecstasy, or as she calls it, clarity. Yeah. Sheila says when she goes through stuff, she's just got to forget about it for a while. Of course, that's why she gets on with Elliot. He's the champ at that. Hold his beer, am I right?
Yep.
Angela takes the clarity, and God damn it, Sheila, you're a bad influence, even though you're well-meaning. Darlene and Trenton end up in what can only be described as the worst place I've ever seen. Clearly the headquarters of the ancient Fortean New York Society of Table Tennis Champions. Can you imagine being in this place? Fuck that.
Yeah, the thing is, after like Mobley and Romero watching Hackers, the place that they're in has big like 90s hacker style movie vibes. Like, I don't believe any bar hangout exists like that, where it's just like a kind of dive bar but with lots of table tennis tables.
How do we make a dive bar worse? Guys, I've got a great idea.
It was like if someone put a bunch of neon lights and table tennis tables into the Flying Duck,
right?
And turned the lights down.
Yes. Aye, totally. That is totally the vibe. 100%. So anyway, no sign of Cisco. Darlene says, are you seriously drinking a sparkling water right now? If you weren't wearing my scarf, I'd kick your ass. While Elliot is deep in withdrawal, Romero argues with Mr. Robot, who, of course, is sitting by Elliot's bedside for the sake of sightline.
Yep.
We're all idiots.
Yep, and look at Mr. Robot's face. Not right now, you can't. The episode's not running live, but I've just got down. Look at his face.
Yeah.
His face is just like, I need to sort this shit out now.
Romero says, you said it yourself, there's casualties in every revolution. So Romero's going full mutiny here in a way that we don't quite appreciate in our first viewing. Because Mr. Robot seems to be sticking up for Elliot, but in fact, he's fighting to maintain control of the operation and indeed his own existence at this point. But eventually he does say, look, you want to leave, just leave. And so Mobley and Romero leave Mr. Robot with Elliot, but in actual fact, they are leaving Elliot alone. Elliot says, I need a hit, I'll be better, it'll get me through this. Mr. Robot says, I can't let you do that. Okay, this is one of my favourite transitions. They go into the backseat of a cab and Matt Quayle goes full Requiem for a Dream with that kind of driving, propulsive, metallic, which is one of my favourite things on the whole soundtrack.
Okay, here's what I want your opinion on.
Go on.
Is this purely morphine withdrawal hallucination at this point, or is this Mr. Robot driving the hallucination as a way of sorting Elliot out?
Now, I have some thoughts on this, and I'm not 100% clear on how to answer that question in a definitive way. All I can say is, I don't think it's just purely morphine withdrawal hallucination. I think at some point Mr. Robot has to be taking control, or at least being in enough control that he can do his best to guide Elliot, not necessarily to things, but away from things. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a second.
But for first-time viewers, none of this seemed like it was a hallucination. It just seems like things go real fucking bad real quick.
Right. Certainly the first this first thing with the drug den, yeah, there's no reason to think this isn't real when you first see it.
But then upon second viewing, it's immediately apparent the guy outside the quote-unquote drug den is talking to Mr. Robot separately from Elliot, and you're like, that's how you know it's not real.
Right. So Mr. Robot leads Elliot in a quest for a hit. Now, as you said, we now know this entire sequence takes place inside Elliot's head. Now, personal note here, by the way. See this house and the street it's on?
Yeah.
Even though it's obviously in the States, it's clearly New York State somewhere. See the design of this house? It's something I don't see a lot in American TV shows, because it's a brick house of a very particular design that's really reminiscent, I think, of British council estates. When I see this scene, it gives me proper vibes of Dumbarton, where I grew up. I'm not saying anything about my hometown and drug dens. I'm just saying they pop up everywhere, guys. But yeah, anytime I see this scene, even the street itself, I'm sure I got drunk on that street when I was a teenager. I'm sure I was at a party at this house while I was in high school, and I felt exactly as Elliot did, purely as a consequence of having downed too much Merry Down cider on a near-empty teenage stomach.
There's one flat, I can't remember the name of the street in Glasgow, but you were probably at a party at it.
Yeah.
Do you know the one I mean? It was always everyone. There was always a party at one. I don't even know who owned the flat, but I was in this flat a bunch of times at a party, and it was like that.
Probably. If we're talking mid-2000s, yeah, probably.
For the benefit of our listeners, not taking morphine or looking for heroin or having gunfights or anything.
Yeah. So Mr. Robot trying to negotiate with the guy out front who insists Elliot has to go alone. So only one part of Elliot's persona is allowed to enter this dungeon. So Mr. Robot's leading the part of Elliot's personality through a particularly grim part of his own subconscious, really, in a quest for the strength to kick this, or to endure it, I suppose, is what we're looking at with this whole thing. Mr. Robot is very clear to say, the minute you're done, you leave. You don't talk to anyone, you don't look at anyone. Now, in a normal drug den scenario, that makes sense, because who knows who you're going to fucking lock eyes with, you know what I mean? Some people get very upset when you just look at them when they're a bit intoxicated, so it's good advice. But in terms of this all taking place inside the melting pot of Elliot's multiple personas, are all these other people parts of Elliot's subconscious? I don't mean fully developed personalities like the ones we see in the power play room. I just mean like sort of slightly underformed parts of the subconscious, like we all have. And if that's the case, then what parts might Mr. Robot be worried about the mastermind interacting with?
Maybe all of them.
Yeah, maybe. If one of them might say, here mate, do you know you're not actually the real Elliot?
Yeah, or one of them goes, oh, you're a bit fucked right now, I'll take over. Like the Underground.
That's a good call, actually.
Doom Patrol.
Yeah, Crazy Jane's, multiple personalities. Yeah, I think that kind of works.
What I kind of got a vibe of here was like Elliot / Mastermind is saying to Mr. Robot, just one hit and I'll be fine, and Mr. Robot's like, no, you wouldn't be, and then he kind of pushes him and goes, this is why you wouldn't be fine, and there's like almost like a negative association here. It's like, if you go and do this shit one more time, you're gonna die. You
know what's great about all these interpretations is that they can kind of all work together. Yeah. I feel like this is where Mr. Robot gets properly lynching. Take a drink, everyone. Where none of these things are ever explained to us exactly what all this stuff means. We are kind of left to sort of sew it together in our own heads and come to whatever conclusion makes the most sense for us.
It even just works just purely on the surface as, oh, he's having mad withdrawal hallucinations.
Exactly. And you know, there's plenty of people out there who are suckers for that whole thing, like, oh, this is a great kind of out your tits hallucination montage, and that's fine, that's totally cool, it totally works on that level and it's great. But because we know how concerned the show is with all the complexities of psychology, certainly my mind cannot stop wondering, you know, what exactly is going on here? Who are all these people in the background? What's the purpose of this bit of production design in this part of the drug den? My brain overanalyzes all of this stuff. So into the drug den, it's a handheld continuous shot, stunning cinematography, everything is brown.
Yep.
There's F Society posters around all of the door frames. The guy in the chair says, hey, it's all good, on you go. And Elliot says, I need morphine pills. And the guy says, this is all we've got right here, it's better, trust me. Hands him the syringe. And this young woman helps Elliot kind of get the gear together. Now, behind, in the larger expanse of this room, I just love the production design in this house, man. It's so good. Like the ragged makeshift curtains, there's so much detail in the background that the camera never focuses on. Like the different coloured floor slats that alternate the kind of rusty brown and anemic green. There's just so much going on in the production design. It's top class stuff. Elliot is saying to us, "Have I sunk so low? What must you think of me? Is it spring? An election year? Shall I hibernate? Did we meet? In money we trust? No, I created," and he gets cut off. And what is he going to say? Is he just going to say he created us, or is he going to say he created someone else?
Yeah, or is he going to say I created myself?
Right, yeah. Also, the way he poses those questions, I also want to just feel like inserting, "Did you ask me this?" It's slippery in here.
The drug den is the junkie Dutchmans.
The Junkmans. That's another Twin Peaks of Turn reference for you kids.
Take another drink.
So Elliot's clearly in a place where he cannot control his own thoughts, and I guess it hammers home to me that there is the risk that maybe Mr. Robot was worried about, that he might not be able to maintain control. So what part of himself is it that comes to the rescue here? That's something to wonder. But anyway, the young woman kisses him, the drug hits, there's distorted voices in the background start arguing, there's a struggle breaks out, gunshots, the violence breaks into the room, the young woman is shot, Elliot gets shot, down he goes. The weather report in the background, lots of clouds, mostly sunny, the humidity will be a tad uncomfortable, which pretty much it recalls exactly Elliot's physical state in the bed in the motel.
Yep.
It's also kind of reminiscent of the Steel Mountain plan. So we segue right into a weird fSobriety video. It seems like it's Mr. Robot behind the mask. Certainly Christian Slater's voice says, "It's time for you all to open your eyes. If you weren't sure of the profiteering and enslavement we've been warning you about, I hope you realise we're running out of time." So Mr. Robot or Elliot's subconscious, it's like he's also telling Elliot he's running out of time. He goes on, "The governments of the world and their corporate masters do not want us to speak. Just, in a way, as parts of Elliot's psyche don't want other parts to speak." He goes on, "Because we unlock truths, we expose villains, we exorcise demons." A lot like the truth Elliot is buried and about the demon of his father. Man, all of this shit just works so well on so many levels now. Elliot's own illusions could be dispersed here if he only pushes a little further, it feels like. The voice goes on, "If you have any interest in waking from your slumber and retrieving lost, damaged or stolen memory, we are here for you. We have your back."
I mean...
Again, right there. It's just laying it all out, man.
Yeah.
We should have seen it. We should have seen it.
Yeah, this is definitely the point where the veil between what we're presented with as Elliot's reality and the loop that the mastermind has the quote-unquote real Elliot trapped in are at its thinnest, because obviously elements of that loop, as we'll find out later in the finale of the show, are bleeding through during this hallucination.
So next thing, my notes, Inland Empire moment. Take a drink, everyone. That's another David Lynch reference. Inland Empire, a 3-hour mind-bending, frustrating and absolutely brilliant.
For the record, my favourite movie.
So there you go. But there's a real Inland Empire moment here where we pull out from the video camera and Elliot's now inside the video. And the mask-wearing Mr. Robot removes the key from around his own neck and he hands it to Elliot. Elliot says, "What does it open? A la Mulholland Drive." Take another drink, everyone. That's another David Lynch reference. Which is appropriate to the possible revelations at play here, like the opening of the sealed area in Elliot's own subconscious, which I think is parallel to that line from Mulholland Drive, where the blue key for the hitman is literally just a key, whereas for Diane, it's like the thing, it represents the deed that will crack open her own subconscious. The mask-wearing figure says, "This was made just for your head." Removes the mask to reveal another mask underneath.
Oh, what he actually says is, he says, "This was made in the Orient."
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
Made in the Orient. Interesting.
And I was like, that's the first, or that's not the first, but that's a big sort of, it's a nod to all the, Dark Army, kind of Chinese involvement, because I'd never picked up on that before. But like I said, when I was watching these episodes, I was watching them with subs on, and that jumped out, and I was like, oh.
So he gives the first mask to Elliot. He says, "Now find your monster and turn the key." So again, Mulholland Drive for real, but also straight up laying out what becomes the crux of season 4. But first, a word from our corporate overlords. And that's when we get the commercial break. You've already heard it. I love that they put that in at exactly the point in the show where there was a commercial break.
Yep.
So they splice this ad in there with all the real world commercials. That's beautiful stuff. Elliot finds himself on a quiet small town street. We did not know at the time, but this is Washington Township. It's the street he grew up on. He comes up to a mailbox. Says the Aldersons, do. The house has vanished, leaving only what I'm going to call a fire walk with me telegraph pole.
Yep, with a thing saying...
Take another drink.
Oh, wait. That's a David Lynch reference, isn't it?
Sure is.
Yep, with the poster on it saying 404 not found.
Not found. Yeah, so then in comes the arm, and she sounds not like... but she sounds like Frere Jacques. This little girl scooters up, and we know this is Darlene. It's never confirmed for sure, but it makes sense that it is Darlene.
Yeah, the fact that she's singing a song about her brother as well.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. The lyrics of Frere Jacques, for anyone who doesn't speak French, they literally just translate as, Brother John, are you sleeping? The bells are ringing. And it's almost like Darlene subconsciously, somewhere in Elliot's subconscious, he's thinking about Darlene saying to him, you need to wake up. And we know that Darlene, as we discussed earlier, is the thing that tends to bring Elliot back to the real world. Man, there's so much going on here, it's crazy good.
Yeah.
Like how... so many details here that just work so brilliantly in the context of the finished show. He greets her by saying, hello, friend. She says, we're not friends, which sort of makes sense since they are siblings. He says, what happened to that house? And she says, first, can you tell me what's your monster? Elliot has no idea how to respond. She leans down, picks up the key from the ground, says, I think you dropped this. We will later learn that that is, of course, Elliot's childhood bedroom key that he hid in the museum to protect himself from Edward. So the symbolism here is, man, it's jaw-dropping now. The thing is, as we said earlier, even on the first viewing, this just seems like great symbolism and great kind of metaphorical stuff, even if you don't entirely get what it means. You can even come away with a satisfying interpretation of what it means for yourself the first time you watch it. Like, it could just be, this is just Elliot looking for his strength to get up, or this is just Elliot trying to remember something that might come in handy later. It could be anything, you know. I think maybe the first time I saw this, I had no conception that it was going to be something that is actually as weighty and world-defining in the show as it ended up being.
Yeah, or something that would come in literally 3 seasons later.
Yeah, just a few episodes from the end of the series. Yeah, so she scoots off and Elliot hums along to Frere Jacques. He then finds himself in his own apartment where Tyrell Wellick is at his computer desk, a la the way he will end up being in real life in Season 4. Qwerty starts talking in his Barry White voice.
I love this whole bit.
Don't be shy, come closer. There's some strong naked lunch energy going on in this.
Oh shit, yeah. It's, you know, it's funny you say that because I have some David Cronenberg notes for like later as well in this sequence.
It really reminds me of the talking bug typewriter. When you live in a fishbowl, says Qwerty, ain't no such thing as change. Same shit, different day. Lighting, furniture. I'm on a loop. Prefiguring, of course.
Yeah.
The real Elliot. Says it won't stop unless my life does. I'm exhausted with this world. Elliot wants to help. Qwerty says, one thing you can do for a brother in a fishbowl, move me to a damn window. Which, by the way, side note, is funnier when you think about where Qwerty ends up in Season 4, in White Rose's window bowl under the power plant.
I can't believe White Rose isn't even in the show yet as well.
I know. So many of the major pieces just not even on the board yet. So yeah, segue to All Safe Michelin star restaurant. I absolutely love this scene. I love the dreamy combo of the office layout with the restaurant, with the 2 locations cross-fertilised. It's so perfect. Just from a sort of surrealist dream enthusiast angle, this is so true to, I think, what dreams are like. And it's a kind of veracity to dreams that I don't see very often on screen.
Yeah.
In terms of the actual experience of how dreams are. Like having these familiar locations merging together, that's the kind of thing that happens in my own dreams all the fucking time. In the context of a dream, it never seems strange. It's only when you look back on it, you go, yeah, come to think of it, that was what was going on there.
Yeah, why would I have walked through that door and been there all of a sudden, and why was
Right.
that? And yeah, it works so well as it gives that really like unsettling unnerving dreamlike quality.
Yeah.
And the way she's like eating Qwerty is what gave me the big Existence vibes.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, that's a good call.
Because she's going to pull his bones out and make a handgun.
Assemble a bone handgun. Yeah, there's also something about just the juxtaposition of that Elliot's workplace where we know he never feels comfortable, and then a restaurant and the idea of having this kind of romantic occasion with Angela. It's such a kind of psychologically disturbing idea of having those two things merged together. The production design in this scene does so much of the work. And that's before we even get to all the other things which are great about it.
There's also the physical dividers between him and Angela.
Yes, yeah. So Elliot is saying to Angela about Qwerty, he's my friend, and she says, yes, and he's delicious. At another table, Magda is forcing young Elliot to eat. Again, whether that's an actual memory or just a message from the subconscious in metaphorical form, or both. Who knows?
If ever there's a time in this show when he is being punished by himself, it's this point. You're kicking yourself while you're down right now, buddy.
Yeah. Oh, God, that's relatable. Anyway, Pop's famous raspberry pie, says the waiter, which intimation of both Edward Alderson and the Steel Mountain hack, that Elliot is enacting as revenge for Edward. He says it's piping hot, approach with caution, which could also be a warning about the hack. Could be a warning about many things, I suppose. Elliot bites into it. There's a big crunch, pulls out the key. Angela gets up, says, yes, I do. There's applause, which, again, on the surface, is perfect dream representation, where events just unfold incongruously like this, just divorced of any sort of linear logic. But I feel like this is the first real confirmation that Elliot has more than just a crush on Angela or a past romantic interest in Angela. I think this is the show for the first time telling us, no, deep down he's actually in love with her.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and it does bleed into that fantasy loop that he has Elliot trapped in.
Yep, we segue straight to there, to Fun Society. Elliot's there in his suit, Angela's in her white dress. It's a scene, as you say, we'll see replicated and brought to completion in the series finale.
Yep, that fucking Perfume Genius song.
Queen by Perfume Genius. Yeah, it's impossible to hear that song and not think about this. Again, man, how crazy is it? Sam Esmail did this so early in the show. Laying it all out there.
Look, here is a scene from the last episode of the show, and two, here is literally wondering what Mr. Robot's about. Angela's about to tell you.
Yeah, those people, I just told them what they wanted to hear, and it's, same thing she says about the wedding that she doesn't quite turn up for in season 4 finale. Production design wise, I love we get that crazy mad Joker face behind each of the characters at this point.
Yeah.
She says, you're not going to do it, are you? You're not going to change the world. Figures, you were only born a month ago. Right. I have a question about this. Because a month ago at this point is the time of the first E-Core hack. But we know the Mastermind was already up to smaller scale vigilante action since before that. So is that a discrepancy? Or do we just read this as the time the Mastermind came more fully into itself, like finding its purpose?
I wonder, is the moment we meet Elliot / the Mastermind a month from the point when the Mastermind has taken over and put Elliot in the loop? So in that case, is the Angela that he's talking to from a month previous? Does that make sense?
I know what you're trying to say. Yeah. Maybe.
Or is it just a time discrepancy?
I feel like so much of this show is so deliberate that I would be surprised if it's a discrepancy.
Or is it, in fact, that the Mastermind is really, is fully realised from the point of the first E-Core hack? So in that respect, he is now a month old.
The Mastermind was already around before the E-Core hack, though.
But I mean, he was around, but then there's the E-Core hack that really cemented the idea of...
Yeah, that's the only way I can kind of square that circle. Unless there's something I'm missing. But that's the only way I can make sense of it. I think this is one of those things I sort of brushed over on previous watches of this show because I was not keeping proper track of the timeline. For the purposes of this, though, I have been keeping track of it. And a month ago from this is it's late February when that hack takes place. So that makes sense in the context of what Angela says here. They're in late March, so it was a month ago when that happened. But the Mastermind was definitely up to his tricks before that, because he was out, setting up what's his face Ron prior to that, and there's no reason I don't think to think that that was the first time the mastermind had done that kind of thing. In fact, he pretty much tells us it's not the first time. So I'm not quite sure. I'm just not quite sure how to interpret that one.
I feel like I like my idea that I can't explain. I think it works pretty well.
It's Angela from the point at which the mastermind put the real Elliot in the loop.
Yep, because he returns to this again, like way later at Christmas. He returns to this exact point, so it's a point in time and space in his head.
Right, okay. I still don't feel it totally works. I don't know. I need to think about this a bit more. Listeners, get in contact. Tell us what you think.
Yep. Sam Esmail, get in touch.
Give us a shout on the Twitters or the Facebooks and let us know what you're thinking.
But either way, what she's saying here is, you only came into being a short time ago.
Yeah,
and then literally says, you're not Elliot.
She says, you're afraid of your monster. Do you even know what it is? She tells him the key doesn't fit. He asks why not. And then her voice goes all distorted. Says, isn't it obvious? You're not Elliot. You're the... And we actually hear her say the, which is crazy. And I think the first couple of times I watched this, I wasn't really paying attention to the that much. And I just always thought, what was she going to say there? But then now it's just so obvious, like, you're the fucking mastermind she's about to say.
This is Sam Esmail / Adam Penn, the true genius behind the show, telling us everything we need to know to unlock this show, while still holding a little bit back.
The Adam Penn is mightier than the sword. The lights shut off, this kind of childish laughter, which... Do we think that's maybe Elliot's own child version of himself?
I thought it was young Darlene again.
Guess that could work as well, yeah. So one light comes on and there's silence. We get Inland Empire again. Take a drink. As Elliot finds himself behind the camera now, with the mask hanging off of it. Now, even the sound design here, actually, Matt Quayle's best drone work going on is very Inland Empire. And the lighting, likewise. Elliot asks, am I still alone? Is this the face of my only friend? Are you my monster? He's asking either the mask or us or both.
And we both know that both of those answers are wrong.
Right, yeah.
In a way, though, the mastermind is a monster to Elliot, but he's not the monster in question here.
Yeah. Although maybe the biggest sucker punch of this, though, is right afterwards we hear a distorted Elliot voice say, I'm here, you are alone. Man, that hit different this time, now that I was really paying attention to it. Do we think that's maybe the real Elliot finding a voice in that moment?
Yep, that is Elliot
like
telling the mastermind, you're alone.
You are alone. You're there only is me.
Yeah.
So fuck off and stop fucking around. But yeah, it hit different this time when I was watching it. All the games go off. It's just a cacophony of video game sound effects and clanking bells, a la Frere Jacques. Elliot sits bolt upright in the dark, realises he's alone, starts sobbing. At some peak Rami sobbing, Mr. Robot emerges from the shadows, as though materialised from thin air. Again, we should have noticed this. He says, no, you're not. I'm not going anywhere, kiddo. Now, is this just resignation from Mr. Robot that he didn't manage to get the mastermind to go all the way? Because if you think about it, he could have been rid of the mastermind at this point. He could have got the real Elliot back. So it's almost like he's saying, fuck, I guess we're back to the original plan. All right, I'm not going anywhere, kiddo. We're in this to the end.
It could be. I still feel there's a part of this is the early seeds being planted of that, like Mr. Robot, the personality, his role as the protector, extends to the mastermind. And even though his job is to protect Elliot, I still feel like he feels a little bit. I don't know. I'm looking into this too much from season 4, but he's always there to sort of try and protect the mastermind as well as Elliot, even though his job is to.
This is the thing we have to keep reminding ourselves. They're not separate. I mean, all of these personas are the same person. I think a lot of the rhetoric around this show in the fan community and by critics and whatnot does get very bogged down in the idea that the personas are all very separate. Ultimately, we are dealing with one person. And I think it doesn't help that if there's one flaw I think Sam Esmail made is by using the term the real Elliot. I've never been fond of that, which is why I call him the unified Elliot, because all of these characters are as real as each other. It doesn't really make much sense to me that the mastermind can have complete control of Elliot's life and not be quote unquote real. That makes no sense to me. He's just as real as any other part of Elliot. So I do feel it gets a bit muddy sometimes when we're discussing the ins and outs and the kind of power politics of these different personas, I think it makes complete sense that, as you say, Mr. Robot is protective of the mastermind because, surprise, he is the mastermind because they're all the same person. It does get very confusing to think about, but the whole thing about the real Elliot, I've never been quite fond. I don't know how about you. Do you get annoyed by that?
No, I know. I think of the quote unquote real Elliot just as original Elliot, as Elliot Prime.
Yeah.
Because he brings all these other. He's the one that brings these other like aspects of himself into being, which obviously they're there already. But all he does is he anthropomorphizes these aspects of his own personality until the point where they seem like separate personalities.
Yeah, they become autonomous.
Yeah, but they are, like you say, they combine Voltron style.
Yeah, that's where I was going. I was heading for a Voltron. To
make Elliot.
Mr. Voltron.
Who is a big robot. It all makes sense. Well done, Adam Penn, you got us.
Meanwhile, back on the streets of Manhattan, Darlene's frolicking drunkenly around benches and whatnot. Trenton is saying maybe you should just walk. Ballet is a little outside your skill set. Darlene's response, the first hint that she actually does ballet.
Yep.
Which is confirmed a few episodes later in her first scene with Angela.
Which is amazing because I love how that drops in and you're like, how the fuck do they know each other?
Yeah, how do they know each other? Yeah. My first thought the first time I watched the show was, is Darlene grifting Angela for some reason? But yeah. Trenton says, I'm sorry Cisco never came. It doesn't use his name, she doesn't know his name, but you know what I mean. Darlene shouts, I am a menace to society. Black limo pulls up. This is the first time we see the Dark Army demon mask. There's a guy standing at the limo. Darlene strides forward, seemingly with no fear whatsoever. This scene, man, is properly sinister. We're kind of being told through the classic language of cinema to be scared of the Dark Army. And sometimes that's the sort of thing that works well, sometimes it falls flat. I always found the Dark Army legitimately terrifying from the first moment I watched this show. And yeah, that mask is ridiculous, but it's the fact that there's a whole cabal of people who are willing to walk around looking that ridiculous, believing that the power they have behind them is enough that it doesn't matter. That these are people who are completely in control and can make anything happen to you.
Also, the Dark Army are zealots that worship White Rose,
absolutely.
So like you know, they have this. They do really well with like getting the actors with those masks on to give that impression with very little other than the occasional bit of Chinese shouting.
Yes.
That these are not people to be fucked with in any way, shape or form.
Yeah, so Trenton reluctantly follows Darlene into the limo. There's two Dark Army guys in the back yelling in Mandarin. Darlene and Trenton have to surrender their phones. So one note I did make here, I think this is the first episode that really solidifies Darlene as being a major autonomous force in the story. And I remember kind of joking when we were talking about the first episode that if I'd known who Carly Chaikin was at the time, I'd be like, why is she listed second in the cast? Whereas this episode is like, oh no, she's going to be a major character in this story.
Yeah.
Which, again, if I'd been thinking about it in a more sensible way and been on the ball, I would have said, wait, is there something more going on between her and Elliot? But somehow I still never saw it coming. Sheila and Angela, meanwhile, are living it up in the bathroom of a club. Sheila's dishing out her last supplies. Schoolboy Q's Hell of a Night playing in the background, absolute banger.
Yeah.
Angela is dinging all of Ollie's calls. Dingy means ignore. She realises, I have to be at work in 4 hours. Sheila thinks this is hilarious. Angela asks Sheila what she's going to do for money now that she can no longer deal drugs. She says, I don't know, just be a haughty waitress, which is exactly what she goes on to do.
Yep.
She says she's glad she got in one last hurrah before she goes all corporate. But she's definitely not worried about the future. Worry is a waste of time, she says. It didn't work out at one job, so I got another. And says to Angela, you worry a lot, don't you? Sheila leans in for a snog, doesn't ask, she takes her own advice. Tells Angela to look in the mirror. See that badass bitch? That's the only person you should ever worry about. And this is what I was referring to earlier. This is the second occasion I think we see Sheila dish out some advice that kind of turns out to be bad. Worse even than the asking permission to kiss, because Angela kind of goes on to worry exclusively about that badass bitch in the mirror to the absolute max in forthcoming episodes, and it ultimately leads to her assisting a terrorist attack that kills thousands of people before she eventually ends up dining on the hot lead buffet on the pristine lawn of Philip Price's Oligarch Manor in season 4. Sad reacts only.
And if Shayla was still alive at that point, she'd probably feel really stupid about the whole thing.
Yes,
But you know,
indeed. It's kind of interesting to note as well, though, like for all of the mad shit that's going on with Elliot and Darlene, it's Shayla who gets Angela tuned to some kind of rebel frequency, as reggae musician Natalie Rise would say. Wait, James, is this another episode of fSobriety?
I think it is.
Roll the music.
Again.
Give us a break! Give us a break!
Hello and welcome once again to fSobriety with me, Craig Woods, in which I try and get James into reggae music, to which he is rather resistant sometimes, although not all the time. James, let's be honest, you've still got Mandy May banging around in your subconscious right now. You cannot get rid of that earworm.
She was a surprising earworm, but Craig,
Yeah.
to quote the philosopher Axl Rose, give me some reggae.
Well, I'm slightly regretting now. If only there'd been a way for me to plan this reverse, because I feel like you're not going to like this one as much, and I don't want to jinx it. Maybe you'll surprise me. I'm not saying you'll dislike it. If you dislike it, well, frankly, there'll be fisticuffs. There would be fisticuffs. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
It'll be socially distant fisticuffs.
Socially fisticuffs. Damn, shame we've already got an episode title. So, this is Natalie Rise. Natalie Rise is an Australian-born reggae musician who is mixed race. She's part white and part Samoan, and her stuff is very political and very imbued in Polynesian culture. She's an incredibly raw artist, quite angry in places, very passionate, very contemporary, but with a strong reggae roots influence. It's way less dancehall and not as catchy and bouncy as some of the other things. It's not like your Mandy Mays or your Savannahs. This is more in the direction of roots reggae. So we'll see how it goes. This is from her most recent album called Rebel Frequency. Thuds this segue, and the track I'm sending you is the title track of said album.
Alright, here we go. This is Natalie Rise's Rebel Frequency. You can listen along at home. Instantly, ding, ding, ding. That you got that.
Upstroke guitar is your favourite thing.
Oh, there's some funny sound effects going on here.
I know you like those.
I'm going to be honest.
Go for it.
With the exception of the upstroke guitar, this isn't giving me much reggae vibes.
Really? Interesting.
It's giving me Santa Gold vibes.
Yeah, okay. Santa Gold does have a strong reggae influence in a lot of her music, though.
This is true, but it's not giving me the Santa Gold reggae vibes.
Maybe that's a good thing, though, since that seems to be the thing that puts you off. I think you have to appreciate the production on this. It is a nice production.
I like it. Like I think her voice is giving me kind of Santa Goldie vibes as well. It has that sort of. You're right, it's got a sort of half sing, half rap kind of.
Yeah.
Half sing, half rap. That's the most fucking boomer sounding thing I've ever said in my life.
Okay, Dad.
I like that rapping songs they have.
That they have now.
It's not giving me many reggae feels.
Interesting. See, this feels very roots reggae to me, albeit through a very contemporary prism. Do you know what? Do you know what I'm starting to realise? I think a lot of your problem with what you think of as reggae is more of a production thing rather than any kind of musical arrangement thing.
It's there's a specific rhythm that irks me a little about reggae, and this doesn't have it.
So it's a drum thing. That's the I guess I should have guessed.
You probably guessed that with me. It's either the 90s or it's drums.
You seem favourable on this more than I expected, but I know it's helped me realise perhaps the areas that are most problematic for you when we talk reggae.
Do you want the shock? Shall
Go
I
for it.
instigate the shock button? I like that more than Mandy May. Whatever Mandy May was, this was a 0.5 higher, I'd say. I like
Wow,
this more.
okay, that is the opposite of what I expected. That's a turnaround for the books. Amazing. Well, that's me cheered up.
I am going to get this in your ear holes. I'm going to check out the rest of this album.
Holy shit.
I'm going to leave
Okay,
this tab open.
this seems like a strong win. And that seems like a perfect note to wrap up this episode of fSobriety. Toodle pip.
Give us a break! Give us a break!
Wow, those guys sure listen to some good reggae
Good
music,
ep.
Craig. Good ep, indeed.
Alright, Darlene strides with Trenton trailing behind to meet Cisco at this street corner where the Dark Army guys have just given them a ride to. Cisco's hanging around outside with a bevy of loose types. Darlene straight up slaps him in the cootin, and it's a pure Andy Cat moment.
Yeah, and this is our first indication that Cisco's not the hard ass guy
Yes.
we probably thought he was.
All this sinister edge to Cisco's character so far just melts away in this instant, and it's a beautiful thing. He greets Darlene by saying, there she is, the ray of sunshine in the dark void of my existence. She asks him, is that what this is about? Because I dumped your ass. Which immediately tells us that the guy she was talking about a couple of episodes ago is this guy. He says, sorry, I wanted to spend my life with you. What a monster I am. He warns her that the Dark Army does not mess around, that whatever F-Society think they're doing, Dark Army are not, as he puts it, motivated by kumbaya shit like that. Darlene does a Shayla, hauls him into a kiss. Oh, Cisco, you sucker. But who can blame him? It actually brought it home to me in this viewing, by the way, that all the awful shit Cisco goes through after this is pretty much a direct result of him trying to win his way back into Darlene's affections.
Yep.
I don't want to accentuate that too much. I sound like an incel. I'm not saying that. I just mean that love can sometimes make people do dumb things, is all I'm saying. Yeah, and he immediately becomes human at this point, whereas before he was random crim.
Yep. He wasn't so much Dark Army as guy in a dark room with a laptop.
Yep, that's it. Meantime, back at the motel, Romero is making the special extreme hangover I referred to earlier, the withdrawal mixture.
Special juice.
His special juice. Callback, guys. Take a drink. Liquid anti-diarrheal, as made by his auntie. Lemon and salt for the electrolytes, decongestant for the runny nose. Elliot tells us this is the third one. Romero says, 7 more, you'll be as good as new. Says, I'm going to pull the van around. Elliot tells Romero, thanks. I do love Romero's delivery of cool. Turns around. Elliot says to us, I missed you. Where did you go? Did you leave or did I? You did, bro.
Yep.
Elliot's voiceover. Do hopeful moments scare me? Of course. Daemons, remember? At some point, an action without user interaction will come along and sweep my legs. Like Johnny Lawrence. Sweep the leg! Darlene wakes up in Fun Society. Trenton is doing her prayers. Darlene looks on with a look of yearning, like she wishes she had something in her life like Trenton's faith. And I don't know whether that's me overreaching there, just because that's something that I feel a lot, and I know I've talked about it before in this podcast. I don't have a religious bone in my body, and I don't really know how to be a spiritual person. I am quite envious of people who are spiritual. I feel like it must be a really comforting thing, and so I see a lot of that in Carly Chaikin's performance here, just as she looks on watching Trenton do this. Side note, by the way, about this, just about the location, as I noticed they got these camp beds in there, I'm like, I would kill for a Fun Society action figure playset, including working machines, popcorn dispenser, and these camp beds for the figures to crash out, and that's the kind of thing I want. Get on it, Mattel.
Yeah, I want Mr. Robot action figures for sure.
I will buy the shit out of that shit. So, Angela, no sleep, straight from the pub, walk of shame to Allsafe before anyone arrives. She uses Ollie's pass to get in, puts in Cisco's CD at Ollie's terminal. Nice work, Angela. Thus infecting Allsafe's network. People gradually start to turn up. Angela does a bolt, while Elliot is telling us in voiceover that daemons don't stop working. They're always active. They seduce and they manipulate. They own us.
I'll tell you what, Craig. That performance by Portia Doubleday there is a far cry from her first ever acting gig, when she was 8 years old in an advert for Goldfish crackers.
Okay, this is an obscure detail I was not aware of. You'll be
I've got
stunned
one.
to hear.
I've got one more before we finish about Christian Slater.
Cool. Yeah, Angela's looking rough here. I'm surprised she managed to get this. Managed to pull this off. Presumably, she's going to get back up the road, get a 2-litre bottle of Iron Brew dinner. She'll be brand new.
Yeah.
We end this episode. Beautiful shot. It's a pure Kubrick shot. It's the overhead on the road, looking towards not a steel mountain, but an actual mountain. Elliot is telling us, even though I created you, it makes no difference. We all must deal with the daemons alone. The best we can hope for, the only silver lining we can hope for in all of this, silver lining, I think, again recalls the white line,
Yep.
is that when we break through, we find a few familiar faces waiting on the other side. Now, Elliot, of course, has more than one familiar face. And I feel like that speech is also kind of reinforcing what I said earlier about each of these main characters and their different storylines having that moment where they cross the line. It's nice, tidy, very exact storytelling. And this kind of bookend, it's just very symmetrical. Just when you thought this episode was going off the rails with all the dreamy weemy stuff, the fact that it ends on this perfect symmetrical note, which even if it hadn't, I still would have loved it. You know, we are talking about two podcasters who love Twin Peaks: The Return, after all.
Yep.
Take a drink. But the fact it ends just so symmetrically like this is chef's kiss. Everything about this episode is just spectacular. I do love the way the camera follows the van as our crew head up. No other cars on the road, and just the way, just the cinematography on that mountain, it just looks lush and beautiful, and it's very evocative of this is the landscape of America, the landscape of adventure, and it sort of gets you in the mood for, oh, next episode is going to be a real jape. It sort of lulls you back into thinking, oh, this is an adventure vigilante hacker story, which I think is part of the reason why so much of the almost revelations in the episode, you sort of brush by them, because the episode uses just enough of the classic visual tropes, the visual language that gets you into that mode of thinking where you're just looking for the next thrill. Everything about this is off the charts stellar storytelling and filmmaking.
It leaves you wondering, for the next episode, is it going to return to, as I say, Vigilante Hacker of the Week? Who wears the trousers in the relationship? Is it our hero Elliot, or is it the anti-hero Mr. Robot? Mm-hmm. Speaking of trousers and Christian Slater,
go on.
Trivia drop. While filming Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, the Starfleet uniform trousers that Christian Slater wears are the same ones that were worn by blues superstar William Shatner in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
That cannot be true.
Yep, Christian Slater found William Shatner's name on a label in the trousers that he was wearing, and then would go on to tell people in interviews how he got into William Shatner's pants.
That is amazing. William Shatner pants?
Yep. And with that leads us on to
the crucial business of 5s out of 9.
I would give Season 1, Episode 4, Daemons, 9 out of 9.
I am giving Season 1, Episode 4, Daemons, 9 5s out of 9. I think this is a perfect episode. Yeah, no, I think the filmmaking and storytelling in this episode is so sharp, and the way it lays down so much of what is the absolute crux of the show is, even on rewatches, it's so thrilling. I get new things from it each time. It's so good, man. This is TV at its best, in the way that back when I bored everyone on our first podcast episode by talking about how much I enjoyed the fact that I now live in an era where television is not the shit thing it used to be in the 90s, is that novelistic style of storytelling, and this sort of underlines that for me. This episode does so much work, as well as doing so many kind of tricks that are almost kind of literary in a way, even though it expertly uses the language of television and cinema to do things that only television can. And nonetheless, in a storytelling sense, is doing very novelistic things by introducing lots of obscure details that seem like segues to nowhere, which are fun, but might not necessarily affect the plot. And it's only afterwards you realise how crucial all of this stuff is. And if, again, the fact it does so in such a concise package, it's incredible stuff.
You find so much more about it every time you rewatch it. Probably the 6th time I rewatch this episode, I'll be like, shit, I missed that. We need to do another episode. But by that point, we'll be on, like, episode 3 of season 2.
Well, we'll just have to do the Mr. Robot rewatch podcast.
Yep. Or what we can do is we can do a commentary for this episode of the podcast.
People are crying out for that, I'm sure.
We'll be as self-referential as Mr. Robot as well, talking about the movie Hackers. So
that wraps it up for this podcast, I think, James.
Yep. I just want to take this brief opportunity to thank everyone for listening.
Yep, we do appreciate it, folks. Thank you very much.
Not just our Argentinian listener, I'm talking to everyone.
Yep, everyone, all over the world.
Just a quick note to say, new year, new resolve to remember and say the right things at the end of an episode. If you enjoy what we're doing, it would mean a great deal to both me and Craig. If you listen to us on iTunes, if you were to leave a review on iTunes, ideally a good one. I don't think you even need to review it, I just think you need to hit a number of stars.
Although, if you want a review, we would be super stoked if you did that, particularly if it's a positive one.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a negative one, actually, don't fucking bother.
Yeah, keep your negative ones to yourself. Hey guys, come on, be the change you want to see in the world. Put good energy out there.
You can change the world, like Elliot Alderson.
Yeah, and what we're doing is definitely comparable to what he achieved. But no, it's the best way for any fledgling podcast to get noticed a lot more, as if it's got reviews, and so we really would appreciate if you enjoy what we do, to spread the word a wee bit in that form. It would be massively helpful, and we would really appreciate it.
And once again, thanks for listening. Thanks for sticking with fSobriety into 2021.
Yep, it's going to be a wild ride. We'll see how it goes. We will be back soon with another episode on something. We will keep you posted through our social medias as to what that will be. We haven't quite decided yet. We're going to see exactly how these early months of 2021 pan out to see what we're going to cover. We're going to try, certainly, for there not to be such a big gap to the next Mr. Robot. We're going to try and do these a bit more regularly. So if you're enjoying these, which I hope you are, then stick around, because we're going to have some fun with it.
And if you only enjoy our Christmas-themed episodes, then don't worry.
Well, we'll see you in 11 months.
I'll see you in 11 months for our next one. But as for me, this drink is looking not quite full but not quite empty. How's yours looking?
James, I have consumed more than half my supply of bottles.
Toodle pip.
Toodle pip.
fSobriety Episode 10, Steel Mountain Sunshine, was conceived by Craig Woods and James Hamilton, edited by James Hamilton, and is a production of Half the Bottle. The theme music is Colossal Estates by Errors, available on Rock Action Records. Questions? Comments? Applications for the Adam Pen Fan Club? Visit our social medias, on Twitter at fSobrietycast, and Facebook unfortunately at facebook.com/fSobrietypodcast. Screw you, youngin'. This bitch can play with the best of them.
So Martin Walsham is speaking Spanish. Spanish? He's speaking Spanish.
Yeah, for sure, with Spanish.
Oh my goodness. I'll start that again.
Imagine at the end of this, it turns out that like the twist is I liked reggae all along. I just didn't like Bob Marley.
Maybe the real reggae fan was the James we met along the way.
I just didn't like the song No Woman, No Cry.
No man, no drummer.
Without